You've been walking for what feels like half the afternoon, though time has become a bit slippery ever since your last village, where the sundial was cracked and the rooster kept forgetting when to crow. The road is little more than a suggestion carved into mud and hope, winding its way past fields where sheep stare at you like you've interrupted something. Your boots squish at every step, packed with the kind of mud that dreams of becoming bricks, and even the occasional tuft of grass seems to sigh as you pass. You carry a small satchel, its contents unimpressive. A crust of bread that's grown harder than church pews, a copper coin that may or may not be counterfeit, and a vague optimism that something warm awaits ahead. The landscape is quietly alive. Trees bend gently in the breeze, their branches creaking like old gossiping women. Crows flap lazily overhead, probably judging your posture. A squirrel darts across the path, carrying something it definitely didn't pay for. The scent in the air is a sleepy mix of damp moss, distant smoke, and the occasional whiff of manure strong enough to command respect. You catch sight of a weathered milestone, half sunk, half legible, and take it as a sign that civilization is, at the very least, theoretically nearby. Rounding a bend, you first see the crooked chimney. It leans slightly to the left, puffing out smoke in a wheezy rhythm, like the tavern is breathing out after a long sigh. Then comes the roof, patched with thatch and what might be an old cloak. A crooked sign swings gently in the wind, creaking on rusty hinges. It bears a faded emblem, a tankard, a chicken, and something that might have once been a lute. If it has a name, it's been long since smeared by rain and time, but you don't need a name. The smell of wood smoke and roasted onion makes the building's purpose clear. As you approach the building, your boots slide slightly on the damp stones of the courtyard. The ground here tells stories. Hoof prints, muddy shoe tracks, and something suspiciously hoof-shaped, despite no sign of a horse. To your left is a rickety fence barely managing to keep in 2 sleepy goats and a very ambitious rooster. One of the goats meets your eyes in a way that suggests it's seen things, tavern things. There's no grand welcome, no fanfare or jester, just the quiet realization that you've reached the place everyone in this town probably ends up eventually, the tavern. Whether it's to drink away their worries, share a laugh, find a bed, or simply shelter from the rain, they all pass through these crooked doors at some point. And now it's your turn. You stand there for a moment, the last light of the sun brushing the edge of the roof. The wind picks up a little, pushing you forward, gently but decisively. One more breath, one more step. You're about to go in. From a few paces away, the tavern already feels like it's leaning toward you, not welcoming so much as sizing you up. Its structure is an enthusiastic mixture of wood, plaster, and architectural wishful thinking. The timber beams jut at slightly odd angles, as though someone assembled the building using a diagram that had been accidentally soaked in soup. Every crack in the plaster has its own tiny story. Some leak moss, one harbors a spider who clearly pays no rent. You're not sure whether the roof is sagging or merely relaxing after a hard life, but either way, it creaks in the breeze as if groaning from the weight of too many tavern songs. A narrow wooden sign swings overhead. It depicts what was possibly once a proud image of something. A tankard, a rooster, maybe even a unicorn. But time, rain, and what looks like bird droppings have done their part to obscure the story. Beneath the painting is the tavern's name, if you can call it that. The blistered flagon, or perhaps the twisted falcon, depending on how you interpret the third letter. Either way, the message is clear. This is a place where expectations are best left at the door. Outside, the yard isn't bustling exactly, but it is alive. A cartwheel rests against the tavern wall, long detached from any cart. A pile of firewood leans precariously beside the door, carefully arranged in that way, where touching one log might cause a cascade. Near the window, a few ale barrels wait patiently, as if they're trying to sneak into the tavern for a drink of their own. Two hens strut between your feet like feathered greeters, pecking at invisible grains with a level of focus that suggests deep philosophical thought. Someone coughs from a second-story window, and a hand appears to toss out the contents of a bowl with all the grace of medieval plumbing. You wisely step aside. A child peeks through a shutter, sees you, then vanishes with a thump and a giggle. The wood of the door looks worn and smooth from thousands of hands before yours, some rough, some desperate, all hopeful for ale, warmth, or just a place to exist where no one expects them to be particularly clean or interesting. The tavern doesn't just look lived in, it looks like it survived things. Rainstorms, arguments, firewood shortages, drunken poetry slams. The kind of place where the floor is sticky, but the company is oddly generous. A safe harbor for traveling merchants, washed-up bards, lovelorn millers, and the occasional goat thief with a heart of gold. This isn't a royal inn or a noble's guest house. This is the village's one-size-fits-most attempt at hospitality. You feel the weight of your journey, the mud on your boots, the stale bread in your satchel. You're more than ready. One last glance at the sky, clouds rolling in lazily, and then you turn toward the door, where a new kind of adventure, and perhaps a bowl of something vaguely edible, awaits. The moment your boots cross from uneven stone to the packed dirt of the tavern yard, a hush seems to ripple outward, though it might just be your imagination, amplified by nerves and a mild suspicion about the smell wafting from nearby barrels. You glance around. The hens pause their pecking. A man leaning against a post glances up from scratching something, either his chin or a flea bite, hard to tell. In the small upper window, a curtain twitches. You've been seen. A lanky stable boy with hair the color of hay and a tunic stained with yesterday's stew spots you and bolts inside, shouting something unintelligible but urgent sounding. Likely some version of, "There's a stranger, and they look like they might have coin," or lice. The door creaks half open, just enough for a pair of eyes to peer out. A moment later, it swings shut again. You hear the low rumble of murmured conversation, the kind of muffled buzz that could be planning your welcome or your immediate overcharging. Someone near the firewood pile snorts. "Hope it's not another bard," a voice mutters. "Last one sang 6 verses about turnip rot." A second voice replies, "Yeah, and all in the wrong key." Laughter follows, the friendly sort you get in a place where everyone already knows everyone else's worst habits and has decided to like them anyway. You try to casually inspect the entrance as if you belong here, but the door dog has other plans. It's large, sleepy, and currently occupying the only dry patch directly in front of the threshold. With one eye cracked open, it sniffs at your boots, sighs heavily, and then goes back to ignoring your existence. This is, in dog terms, polite indifference, the medieval version of a doorman giving you a once-over and deciding you're probably not worth barking at. Above you, a second window opens. A middle-aged woman leans out, holding a pair of socks with tongs. She squints. "You lost?" she asks flatly. Before you can respond, she shrugs. "Doesn't matter, just don't sit in old Hammy's spot," he bites. The socks are draped over a shutter, and the window slams shut with the casual finality of someone done with your whole situation. Even the tavern's cat gives you a moment of passive judgment. It appears from behind a barrel, arches its back, stretches with exaggerated leisure, and flicks its tail before vanishing again as if to say, "You'll do." In this village, and certainly in this tavern, your arrival is more spectacle than novelty. Travelers are both expected and distrusted, welcomed and wagered on. You are now officially the wild card in tonight's routine. You tighten your grip on the strap of your satchel. You've already been silently assessed by everyone from children to livestock. There's no fanfare, no red carpet, just a door waiting to creak open and swallow you into its smoky, creaky, slightly damp embrace. You take a deep breath and raise your hand toward the latch. Your fingers curl around the iron latch. It's cold and slick, either from condensation, ale spills, or the accumulated sweat of generations of nervous hand. You give it a slight tug. It resists at first, like the tavern itself isn't quite ready for newcomers. Then, with a reluctant groan, the door swings inward on hinges that sound like a sad violin played by someone with the hiccups. Immediately, the scent hits you, an intricate bouquet of smoke, boiled onion, sour ale, wet wool, and something sweetly singed. The air inside is thick and warm, stirred by the low flicker of a hearth that dominates one wall, its orange glow washing the uneven floor in shadows. Your boots step down with a reluctant squelch into the rushes, this week's version of a floor mat, scattered in hopes they'll absorb more mud than they redistribute. Conversations pause, not completely, just enough to let you know you've been clocked. A few heads turn your way, eyebrows lifting, eyes narrowing in vague curiosity. A portly man in a green cap gives you a slow once-over, then returns to sipping his drink with the dedication of a man whose cup holds more memory than ale. Somewhere to your left, a lute string snaps with a dismayed twang, followed by a muttered blast from someone who probably claimed they used to play for a duke. You are now part of the evening, whether you like it or not. You close the door behind you, and it thuds with finality, a gentle wood-on-wood whisper that seals you inside this oddly warm, oddly sticky world. The floorboards creak underfoot as you take a tentative step forward. To your right, a pair of travelers argue softly over whether the stew tasted more like mutton or regret. Near the hearth, a dog sprawls lazily, its ears twitching in time with the crackling fire. You catch a glimpse of a barmaid hoisting a tray stacked with mugs, moving with a grace that says she's dodged more elbows than she's spilled drinks. The room isn't large, but it feels infinite in detail. Every beam above is etched with old initials, dice scores, or poorly carved hearts. A lantern hangs from a hook above the door, swaying slightly and casting a slow-moving dance of shadows. Tables are strewn about with no sense of symmetry. Some lean, some wobble, all bear the scars of long evenings and clumsy elbows. The patrons are bundled in cloaks and stories, their faces flush from the fire and whatever they've been drinking. As you stand there, letting your eyes adjust, the warmth seeps in, through your boots, into your chest, even behind your ears. You are no longer a traveler on the road. You are a soul in a tavern, part of something ancient and strangely intimate. The noise slowly returns to its usual buzz, and a few murmurs shift your way. There's no turning back now. You walk in. You take your first full breath and immediately regret committing to it so enthusiastically. The tavern's scent is layered. It's not a bad smell exactly, just profoundly specific. Smoke from the hearth wraps itself around the room like a clingy X. Underneath that, there's the ever-present musk of damp straw that's been stepped on too many times, never properly replaced, and probably houses a minor civilization of beetles. A sharp tang of spilled ale clings to the floorboards, still sticky from last night's over-enthusiastic toast to absolutely nothing. And then there's something else, sweet, maybe. But not in the comforting way, more like the faint memory of honey that's been boiled, burned, and then left to ferment behind a barrel for several months. Possibly the tavern's infamous meat pie cooling somewhere. Or someone's feet. It's honestly hard to say. The fire crackles with a wet pop, sending out the occasional puff of smoke that takes a detour into your sinuses. You blink against the haze. The whole place feels like it's been marinated in history and ham. In the far corner, a bundle of herbs tied to the rafters swings gently, meant to freshen the air perhaps, though now mostly decorative and dusty. You suspect whatever scent they once offered has long since surrendered to the onion. Despite all this, there's a strange comfort to it. These are not the sterile, carefully engineered aromas of a modern world. These are the honest smells of a place where people live hard, eat quickly, and air things out only when absolutely necessary. It's like being enveloped by the world's strangest, warmest blanket. A little itchy, maybe damp in the corners, but undeniably real. You pass near a cluster of men playing cards, their tankards leaving ringed stains in permanent patterns across the wood. One of them leans back just enough for you to catch the sour note of old garlic. Another waves his arms mid-story, sending a puff of ox-skin sleeve and questionable hygiene your way. Still, they don't flinch. Yay. They're used to this. Their noses have long since adapted or simply retreated. The rushes underfoot crunch softly as you move deeper in. Not actual straw anymore, more like a ground cover of hay, dried herbs, and crumbs from meals long past. It muffles your steps, helps soak up spills, and provides excellent nesting for the mice you pretend not to see. A large dog lifts its head as you pass, sniffs the air with practiced disinterest, and resettles with a grunt. Even the animals here have accepted the olfactory reality. Every tavern has its own perfume, built from years of fires, feasts, fights, and farts. You've just walked into this one's welcome. And somehow, beneath all the chaos and questionable ventilation, there's something almost soothing about it, like you've entered a place that doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is, a slightly moldy, mostly merry den of warmth. And now that you're inside, there's no escaping the smell. But maybe, just maybe, you're starting to get used to it. The air inside the tavern doesn't exactly move. It settles. It hangs in a thick, ambient cloud, a mix of old smoke, warm breath, and 100 dinners past. Breathing here feels like sipping a warm broth of human presence and slightly singed wood. It's not unpleasant, but it is heavy. The kind of air that sits on your shoulders and says, "You're staying a while, aren't you?" There's a single large hearth at the far wall, its flames sputtering cheerfully beneath a massive blackened cauldron. The cauldron's contents are a mystery. It bubbles now and then in a way that suggests either soup or science. Next to it, stacked logs await their turn, half damp and hissing when added. Above the hearth, a mantel displays what someone, long ago, decided were decorations. A cracked horn mug, a soot-blackened ladle, a bundle of dried turnips strung like garlic. It's a curious shrine to both survival and strong stomachs. Lighting in the tavern is a collaborative effort. Tallow candles flicker in iron holders nailed crookedly to beams. Some are down to the stub, their drips congealed into odd, ghostly shapes. A few wall sconces have been replaced with lanterns that cast soft, wandering shadows across patrons' faces, making everyone look vaguely conspiratorial. Above, a large iron chandelier dangles from a chain, its candles leaning as if drunk themselves. It sways slightly when the wind sneaks in through the chimney. And of course the fire's glow bathes everything in a dancing amber hue, painting wrinkles into deeper furrows and making even spilled ale look nostalgic. The floor, if one can call it that, is a living chronicle of spills, boots, and the slow grinding march of time. Technically, it's made of wooden planks. Realistically, it's covered in a messy patchwork of rushes, straw, old herb bundles, and crumbs. Lots of crumbs. The scent of thyme occasionally wafts up from beneath your boot, which is pleasant until you realize it's masking something less delightful. You take a step and your foot sticks, just briefly, just enough to make you question every choice that brought you here. Then it pulls free with a quiet, squelching sigh, as though the tavern floor disapproves of your movement. At one point you pass a place where the floor dips dramatically, enough to catch a spilled drink or the pride of someone slightly too ambitious in their dancing. No one seems concerned about it. A chair has been strategically wedged into the dip, forming what is either a tripping hazard or a test of character. Children, in particular, seem to delight in leaping over it, sometimes landing, sometimes not. It's part of the tavern's charm. That and the lingering hope that the floor won't give way completely during a hearty toast. You're beginning to understand this space not as a room, but as a creature, creaky, worn, and oddly forgiving. It accepts your presence. You feel yourself exhale a little, and just like that, you've taken root for the night. The tavern hums, not with music, not quite yet, but with that strange orchestration of human life compressed under one crooked roof. You don't notice it all at once. It seeps in slowly, like steam from a pot left just a little too long over the fire. You hear it first in the laughter, low, shared chuckles between regulars who've been arguing over the same game of dice since last market day. Their voices roll and crack like old leather, comforting in their worn predictability. Then there's the clatter of tankards against wood. It isn't rhythmic, but it has its own logic. Some hit the tables with a hollow thud, some with a faint slosh that threatens to become a spill. Occasionally, someone knocks over a mug entirely, and the splash is followed by either a grunt, a cheer, or a slap on the back, depending on what was said just before it happened. Behind the bar, the tavern keeper mutters to herself as she scrapes foam off overflowing mugs with practiced efficiency. Her ladle rings against a pewter pot. A spoon stirs something that's either soup or last night's leftovers trying to disguise themselves. Pots bang. A door to the back swings open with a squeak, followed by a sharp command barked into the kitchen. You catch a high-pitched reply. Perhaps the scullery maid defending her technique for scrubbing turnips. Or maybe it's a romantic spat involving onions. Hard to say. From somewhere up in the loft, the soft creak of someone shifting in bed, the early drinkers who've already passed out, snoring in harmony with the rhythm of the tavern below. Each breath they take in slumber adds to the sleepy atmosphere. It's like the whole building exhales with them. A broom drags lazily across the rushes, scattering more than it sweeps. The sweeping is less about cleanliness and more about rhythm, a sort of slow swish-swish that sets the tempo for background living. Somewhere near the fire, the dog sighs again, a long breath of resignation as if the general noise is too much, even for it. One ear twitches in time with a distant spoon tapping against ceramic. There's music too, sort of. Not structured melodies yet, just warm-up noises. Someone plucks at a lute with more optimism than skill. Another man hums an off-key tune that might once have been a drinking song, now reduced to a low, wordless drone. It sounds a bit like bees trying to remember a melody. You find yourself breathing with it all, matching your pace to the mood. The sounds aren't intrusive. They wrap around you. None demand your attention. They just ask you to be part of them. This isn't the silence of a lonely road or the wild stillness of a forest. This is the noisy quiet of company, of shared space and old wood, and people too tired to be anything but themselves. And in that strange, cozy din, you start to feel the long day gently unwind. There's no denying it. This place is lived in. Not just used, not simply old, but deeply worn, as if the building itself has absorbed generations of spilled drinks, muffled gossip, and the sighs of tired villagers. Everything inside the tavern seems to hum with familiarity, as though even the furniture has its own well-worn habits. You slide your hand along the edge of a table and feel the uneven polish left by countless elbows, tankards, and possibly a few dice rolled in desperation. The surface is sticky. You try not to think too hard about why. In one corner of the room, a man cheerfully slaps the tabletop to emphasize a story, and his hand doesn't quite lift off cleanly. No one comments. It's just part of the environment. Stickiness here isn't a failure of cleanliness. It's part of the patina. A coating of life, layers of old beer, dribbled stew, and who knows how many failed romances sealed forever in dried cider stains. Your boots make occasional soft sucking sounds as you move across the floor, catching in invisible patches of syrup or soap, or both. Beneath the thick straw and crushed rushes, the planks creak not from age, but from overuse. You can almost hear them complaining in wood language. Again, another one. Fine, step there, but not too hard. You step lighter out of respect. Chairs wobble slightly as you try to sit, none of them perfectly balanced. Each one is slightly unique, repaired in different ways, some with twine, others with nails that may or may not be holding anything together. You choose yours carefully, as one local silently nods approval at your selection. It's a minor social victory. You've picked the chair that only collapses after 2 tankards, not before. Your eyes drift upward. The ceiling beams above are low, darkened with soot and sagging slightly like tired shoulders. Someone has carved initials into one. E.G. Loves L.B. 1296. It's flanked by 2 dice scores and a crude drawing of something that might be a pig or a very fat baby. It's impossible to say whether these marks were made out of boredom, celebration, or deep personal symbolism. They remain, regardless, like cave paintings in a temple of barley and breath. You notice the smudges on the window panes, fingerprints pressed from the inside, perhaps from someone searching for a friend or just looking wistfully at the rain. The light that comes through them is distorted, softened. There's no harshness here. The world beyond the tavern looks blurred, as though even it respects the boundary of this sleepy little sanctum. It's messy, it's cluttered, it's questionably clean. And yet, despite, or maybe because of all that, this place feels safe, familiar, like it's already forgiven you for whatever state you arrived in. The tavern doesn't ask where you've come from or how long you'll stay. It simply gives you a chair, a table, and a sticky spot to call your own. You take your seat, tentatively, carefully, as if the furniture might resent you for being too sudden, and allow your eyes to wander. The room is neither packed nor empty. It breathes with a comfortable fullness, like a coat that's just a little snug around the shoulders but still familiar. The light is dim and uneven, patchy from the flicker of lanterns and hearth fire, leaving corners half lit and ripe for suspicion. Every table has its story, told in ale rings and elbow scuffs. The patrons around them each play their part in this sleepy, slightly fermented play. Closest to the hearth, 2 older men sit in companionable silence, sipping something dark from cracked mugs and staring into the fire like it owes them answers. One of them has a nose that could detect weather changes. The other's beard appears to have absorbed more soup than his mouth ever has. They're not here to talk. They've said everything worth saying 20 winters ago and are just here to see if the fire ever changes its mind. To your right, a table of farmhands crowd together on a shared bench, their hands still bearing traces of soil and the occasional scratch that probably has a whole story behind it. They speak in low tones, occasionally bursting into laughter that shakes the dust from the rafters. One slaps another on the back, causing the victim to spill ale down his tunic. He curses, then laughs harder. This is their rhythm, one you suspect repeats every night, adjusted only by the size of the harvest or the freshness of gossip. Toward the far end, near a window that barely shuts, a cluster of traveling merchants lean together in conversation. Their cloaks are newer, boots shinier, and one of them smells faintly of imported oranges, a scent so out of place it momentarily stuns you. They're likely planning trade routes or complaining about tariffs. Or both. Their eyes flick toward you now and then, measuring your usefulness, your threat level, and whether you might be convinced to buy something before morning. Near the door, a group of young men play dice with practiced ease. One leans back in his chair so far he's almost horizontal, and yet he stays upright with the confidence of someone who's done this since childhood. Their laughter comes sharp and quick, like strikes from a bell. At their feet, a chicken wanders aimlessly, perhaps placing bets of its own. Every now and then, someone new enters. The door creaks, all heads tilt for a moment, and then the room resets. You're no longer the center of attention. The tavern's memory is short and forgiving. You've been folded into the background hum. This, you realize, is not just a place to eat and drink. It's a stage, a communal hearth for old jokes, quiet judgment, whispered secrets, and long, warm silences. And now, with your back slightly straighter and your boots just a bit less muddy, you're part of the audience. Not everyone gives you the cursory glance. Some patrons never even raise their heads. You notice them tucked into the edges of the room, pressed into shadows, hunched over their mugs or their own silent thoughts. These are not the loud ones. These are the lingerers, the weathered sorts who've been here so often, they've started to blend into the very grain of the wood. One man near the back wall sits alone, cradling a small cup of something that steams faintly, as though it's been reheated 3 times already. His hood is pulled low, and from where you sit you can only just make out the tip of a nose and a flash of silver in his beard. Every so often he mutters to himself, not in a crazed way, just in a rhythm that suggests he's finishing old conversations no one else remembers. His fingers trace the rim of his cup like he's playing a silent song for ghosts. A woman nearby keeps her back to the room entirely. Her hair is tied in a neat braid that suggests military precision or personal habit. She eats slowly from a bowl, lifting each spoonful with deliberate care. No one speaks to her. No one bothers her. Which, in this place, speaks volumes. She might be a widow, a healer, or just someone whose glare once ended a brawl before it began. Either way, she has carved out her quiet. Then there's the pair at the bench beneath the window, the one with the cracked shutter that lets in the occasional gust of cold. They don't speak. They don't eat. They simply sit shoulder to shoulder, breathing in time. One wears a leather apron, the other a homespun cloak. Maybe they've just finished a shift at the forge. Maybe they're waiting for someone who never quite arrives. Maybe silence is just their way of holding hands without holding hands. You realize this tavern isn't just for the merry. It's also for the tired, the quiet, the people who have nothing left to say, but still need to sit somewhere warmer than their own doorsteps. These folks are not ignored. They are respected, left alone, but never abandoned. The barmaid, when she passes, tops off their mugs without asking. One nod is exchanged. No words, just acknowledgement. And in a world where survival often feels like noise, sometimes the softest lives leave the deepest marks. A tall man near the hearth wears a patched coat that reaches his knees and hasn't moved in half an hour. You're not sure he's awake. He might be sleeping with his eyes half open, or meditating, or just listening. No one nudges him. The dog by his feet treats him like furniture, leaning against his boot in lazy familiarity. These are the ones who don't raise a toast, who don't cheer at dice throws or slap backs in laughter. But without them, the tavern would lose its balance. Too loud, too wild, too eager. These silent patrons are the anchor. And in your own stillness, watching them, you begin to understand that being unnoticed isn't always the same as being alone. You don't notice him at first. He's nestled in the crook of the hearth like a well-fed cat, except he's neither quiet nor particularly graceful. One eye squints at you from beneath a patch sewn with what looks like embroidery thread and a stubborn sense of fashion. The other eye, his working one, glistens with a mischievous twinkle that promises unsolicited songs and equally unsolicited facts. He holds a battered lute, its strings protesting under each pluck. The wood is worn smooth, not from love, but from being used as both instrument and occasional weapon. His beard looks like it's been trimmed with a spoon, and his teeth are a roll of dice. Some missing, some there but questionable, and one impressively gold. As you glance his way, he calls out, "Oi!" "Stranger, you look like someone who appreciates a good verse and an even better complaint." Before you can answer, he's already playing, or attempting to. The tune is halfway between a melody and a sneeze, but he sings with gusto. A song about a pig who stole a noble's boots. It ends in tragedy, but mostly because the pig fell in love. Between verses, he interrupts himself to rant about the rising price of barley, the questionable morals of town officials, and the time he once beat a knight at chess by pretending he didn't know the rules. "Historians still argue whether he let me win," he says proudly. "I argue he was just very bad at chess." Some locals roll their eyes. Others chuckle softly. He is part of the furniture now. No one quite knows when he arrived. He's always just been there. Some say he was once a court bard who insulted the wrong duchess. Others whisper he's a noble in hiding, or perhaps just someone who likes people assuming he is. He pauses occasionally to sip from a mug that may contain ale, mead, or melted candle wax. It's hard to tell. After one particularly raspy stanza about a lovesick turnip farmer, he turns to you and grins, requests, "No? Good. I don't take 'em anyway." Despite everything, the croaky voice, the wandering eye, the unpredictable volume, there's a kind of charm about him. He isn't here to impress. He's here to exist, loudly and with flair, and the tavern lets him. You catch yourself smiling, even laughing once or twice, not because he's particularly good, but because he believes in what he's doing, and in a place like this, sometimes that's enough. It happens so subtly, you almost miss it. One moment you're a stranger in a sticky chair, the next you're another piece of the night. A nod from a nearby patron, a shared smirk over a poorly timed burp from the fireplace corner. You've been absorbed. The farmhands don't glance at you anymore. The barmaid doesn't hesitate before slapping a mug on your table. It comes with no question, just a small grunt and the clink of pottery. You've passed the unspoken test. You didn't stare too long, you didn't interrupt, and you didn't complain about the smell. Welcome. The background noise wraps around you differently now. Before it was something you listened to, now it's something you're contributing to. Even your breathing feels synchronized. You take a sip from your mug and realize belatedly that no one told you what's in it. Doesn't matter. It's warm, slightly bitter, and oddly comforting, like drinking a memory of bread. The minstrel winks at you mid-song. A child scurries by and doesn't avoid your feet. Even the dog under the table nudges your boot with sleepy acceptance. You exist in this room's memory now, not as a main character, just as someone who belongs. You find yourself leaning back, letting your limbs stretch slightly. The chair creaks in protest, but doesn't collapse. A good sign. The fire crackles, and you catch the faintest trace of rosemary. Someone, somewhere, is pretending this stew has seasoning. A man across the room raises his mug in your general direction. You raise yours back. No words exchanged, no introductions. Just the medieval equivalent of a Facebook friend request, mutual awareness and vague approval. You hear another door open behind the bar, a storage room perhaps. A cat trots out, tail high, pauses to stare at you and then moves on. Even that feels like a kind of knighting ceremony. No one asks who you are. No one really cares. What matters is that you've sat, you've listened, and you haven't insulted the bread. That's all the credentials needed. And in a world where approval often feels bartered or begged for, this quiet acceptance is a balm. You sip again. The taste is stronger this time, maybe a hint of apple. Or is that wishful thinking? Someone sneezes 3 tables over. Someone else replies with a hearty, "May the fleas be merciful." A toast follows, for reasons unknown. The walls may lean. The floor may squelch. But for tonight, in this moment, you're not on the road. You're not passing through. You're one of them, and it feels almost like home. Seating in a medieval tavern is less about availability and more about diplomacy. There's no host to guide you, no laminated chart of available tables. Instead, you stand there like a confused statue while the room gently decides whether you deserve a place or not. You spot a few options, but each one comes with invisible rules carved into the very air. The first bench you see is empty on one end, but occupied on the other by 2 elderly women with knitting in their laps and disapproval in their eyes. Their expressions say, without a word, that this seat is not for you. You take the hint and move on, grateful to avoid being silently hexed by matching wool scarves. Another table, more promising, holds only one person. A large man with a beard so expansive it could host a small bird colony. He's currently eating something from a bowl without looking at it. His spoon travels from bowl to beard and back with mechanical rhythm. There's an empty chair across from him, and you briefly consider asking if it's free. But the way he pauses his chewing when you glance his way suggests the seat is taken. Probably by a spirit or a memory or both. Then there's the table near the fire, where a group of dice players laugh and shout over one another, occasionally banging the table for dramatic flair. One chair is free, slightly ajar as though recently vacated, but as you approach, someone tosses a boot onto it. Whether this is a challenge or a placeholder is unclear. Either way, you retreat, discreetly, like someone pretending they were just walking by. Finally, you find your Goldilocks spot. A three-legged stool pushed against the wall between two tables, close enough to the hearth to be warm, but far enough from the noise to keep your ears intact. You test it cautiously. It wobbles, considers collapsing, then settles into a new angle and holds firm. You sit, back straight, feet braced, hoping gravity will be kind. From your new perch, you can observe without intruding. You're at the periphery of three different conversations, one about pigs, one about taxes, and one that seems to involve both. Occasionally, someone at the nearby tables glances your way, not suspiciously, just out of idle curiosity. You're new, but not too new. Present, but not prominent. And that's a perfect place to be. The stool, you notice, has initials carved into its side, multiple sets, layered over years. Some have hearts, some have dates. One just says, oof. You briefly consider adding your own, but decide against it. Better to earn that privilege with a few more nights and a few less suspicious glances. You lean back slightly, carefully, and let the scene wash over you. No one's asked your name. No one's asked you to leave. In the complex seating politics of this tavern, that's as good as a royal invitation. Once you've claimed a seat in a medieval tavern, you may think the work is done. It is not. The act of sitting merely opens negotiations with the furniture, and more importantly, with the people around you. Because elbow room here is less a right and more a constantly shifting concept governed by mugs, cloaks, and the mysterious expansion rate of nearby patrons. Your stool, while humble, turns out to be well positioned at the junction of two larger tables. That sounds convenient in theory. In practice, it means every time someone leans back or gesticulates wildly with a chicken leg, you have to dodge like a mildly confused court jester. You become acutely aware of your elbows. They feel enormous. You pull them in tight, like a polite bird folding its wings. To your left, a man in a felt hat spreads out a parchment, nearly brushing your knee. He's explaining something about land boundaries, although he's definitely not a landowner. More likely, he's memorized the lingo from a friend who once visited someone with a fence. He points animatedly to imaginary fields while jabbing the air with a bread crust. You nod politely when he glances your way, hoping he'll interpret it as legal agreement or blessed disinterest. On your right, a group of three tradesmen are sharing what they claim is sausage, but might also be compressed mystery. They talk over one another in the rhythm of lifelong friends, finishing each other's complaints. Their elbows gradually begin to encroach. First their sleeves, then a mug, then one man's entire arm as he reaches to salt something that might not need salting. You begin to feel like a boundary marker more than a customer. Then comes the jostle. It's not aggressive, just someone squeezing behind your stool en route to another table. Your back meets a woolen coat, a half apology is murmured, and something cold and metal brushes your shoulder. You hope it was a tankard. You hope very hard. The person moves on, leaving you to recenter your spine and dignity. The table creaks as someone nearby shifts, and you instinctively brace your mug. The tavern's internal physics are unpredictable. A mug too close to an edge can vanish like a magician's prop, pulled by invisible elbows and tilted benches. You keep yours securely between your hands like a rare artifact. You've seen what happens to those who trust tabletops too easily. Eventually, you learn the rhythm. Lean in when they lean back. Tilt sideways when someone stretches. Raise your mug during dramatic gestures. It's a dance. A slow, ale-scented, mildly sticky dance that everyone seems to know instinctively. And through it all, there's a strange sense of camaraderie. You're not being ignored, you're being absorbed. Your shoulder might get bumped, your foot might be stepped on, but no one's trying to move you. You're part of the crowd now. Elbow room is fluid, and tonight it includes you. You've got your seat. You've navigated the elbow etiquette, but now comes the final frontier, the table, or rather, the few inches of warped wooden plank that might pass as your temporary territory, if you're quick, clever, and not too picky about cleanliness. The table near you is a battlefield of mugs, bowls, elbows, a half-plucked feather, and something sticky that you strongly suspect began life as a plum. There's no formal system for who gets what space. Instead, it's a bit like watching ice flows bump together in a crowded river. Everything shifts slightly depending on who laughs, who leans, and who sneezes. You try to edge your mug forward, claiming a modest 6-inch square. It's a diplomatic gesture, accompanied by your best neutral expression. A wiry man with soot-blackened fingernails notices the move and gives a subtle nod, part respect, part warning. You're now playing the game. Your next goal is to establish a place to set down your satchel. The floor is out of the question. It squelches when stepped on, and something down there just hissed. Hanging it from the back of your stool would be fine if your stool had a back, which it doesn't. You opt for resting it on your lap, one hand on the strap. Possessions left unwatched in a tavern have a habit of becoming someone else's legend. A barmaid passes by and sets down a hunk of bread near your mug. She doesn't ask if you ordered it. It simply arrives, warm, lopsided, and with a knife sticking out of it like a sword in a stone. You take this as a good sign. Bread means you've been noticed. Bread means you've been included, but now the real struggle begins. Cutting it, with one hand occupied guarding your satchel and your forearms diplomatically retracted, you must angle your torso just right to slice downward without poking your neighbor or launching crumbs across the room. The first attempt results in a dramatic creak from your stool. The second succeeds in halving the bread, but also sends your knife skittering toward a puddle of spilled ale. A nearby patron retrieves it without comment, wipes it on his sleeve, and hands it back with a grunt of approval. You nod, grateful and vaguely concerned. Every inch of the table is in use. Tankards move like ships at sea, never staying long in one spot, always in danger of capsizing. Someone dips their spoon too forcefully into a communal stew, splashing a bit onto your sleeve. It's warm. You dab at it with the cleanest edge of your cloak and pretend you meant to get involved in someone else's dinner. Slowly, you carve out your space. One sticky, wobbly inch at a time. You balance your mug, your bread, and your dignity as best you can. And eventually you find it, that sweet spot where nothing tips over and no one glares at you. In a tavern like this, that's as close as you'll get to luxury. It begins quietly. A shared glance. A muttered joke you're not meant to hear but do. A clink of mugs as someone nudges theirs toward yours in a soft, accidental toast. Without warning, your patch of table stops being yours alone. It becomes ours. A man across from you, broad-shouldered, red-cheeked, with a voice that rumbles even when he whispers, nods toward your bread. "Not bad tonight," he says, tearing into his own with all the delicacy of a trebuchet. "Could use more salt, but what couldn't?" His grin shows a gap where a molar once lived. You reply with something non-committal but polite, and suddenly he's launched into a tale about a pig that chased him through a cabbage field when he was 8. It has no point. That doesn't matter. To your right, the trio of tradesmen begin including you in their banter. You're not invited formally. You're simply spoken to, mid-conversation, as though you were always part of it. "What say you, stranger?" one asks. "Better to owe a baker or a blacksmith?" Before you can respond, another chimes in. A baker feeds you, a blacksmith arms you. One saves your stomach, the other your neck. Laughter. You raise an eyebrow and get a chorus of approving knocks on the table. You've passed another invisible test. There's a woman at the far end of the table, spinning a wooden coin between her fingers. Her eyes are sharp, her drink untouched. She hasn't said much, but she catches every joke, every glance. Eventually, she offers you a riddle, delivered so dryly you almost miss it. What grows backwards and drinks without a mouth? You think, you guess wrong, you guess again. She smirks. A tavern tale. It doesn't make perfect sense, but it doesn't have to. The room chuckles. You've been initiated. Someone offers you a bite of something vaguely meaty, wrapped in something vaguely bread-like. You accept. It's hot, spiced with something unidentifiable and likely to cause regret by morning. But it's shared. And that's the important part. Soon, the table becomes its own tiny world. Stories flow easier than the ale. Some are repeated from the night before, some are invented right there. Everyone nods, laughs, winces at the right moments. No one cares whether it's true. What matters is the telling, the rhythm, the warmth. A man spills a bit of his drink, and half the table moves in a practiced wave. Mugs lifted, shoulders tucked, laughter like a tide pulling back. You move with them instinctively. That small choreography, that communal sway, seals it. This table, like the tavern itself, doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to everyone, tonight. That includes you. And as the fire pops and the night thickens outside the shuttered windows, you find yourself leaning forward, eyes bright with story light. You're not just passing through anymore, you're part of the story now. You decide it's time to eat, or at least attempt something vaguely resembling food. But in a medieval tavern, there is no menu, not a chalkboard, not a list, not even a barkeep muttering options. The offerings are more like whispered rumors passed from table to table, evolving as they go. What was bean stew by the hearth becomes hare soup by the window, and somehow ewe pie by the door. You listen carefully. A man at the next table claims the stew has turnips tonight. Another insists it's radish and goat. A third just sighs, says it's brown, and leaves it at that. You glance toward the kitchen door, a swinging panel of cracked wood behind the bar, currently being shoved open by a red-faced boy carrying a pot big enough to drown in. The smell wafting out is complicated. There's onion, yes, and some kind of meat, or possibly something that used to be meat but lost a fight with a slow fire. Behind the bar stands the tavern keeper herself, broad-shouldered, aproned, and wielding a ladle like a royal scepter. She has the gaze of someone who's seen every type of customer walk through these doors, and none of them have surprised her since the old king died. She's serving up bowls without fanfare, slapping down tankards like she's sealing business deals. You approach cautiously, not wanting to interrupt whatever internal rhythm she's working in. Before you can speak, she eyes you up and down and says, "You'll have stew. It isn't a question." You nod. "And ale," she adds. Again, not a question. You nod again. This is not a negotiation. This is dinner. Coins change hands. Your last few coppers, placed carefully on a worn section of the bar where hundreds of others have left theirs. She sweeps them away with a motion that says, "These will do, but barely." A clatter from behind the bar signals a pot being brought forth. She dips in the ladle with the ease of long practice, scoops out a portion, and sloshes it into a wooden bowl that's seen better centuries. Something wobbles in the mixture, possibly a root. Possibly ambition. She sets it down and gestures to a side table with an assortment of wooden spoons and slices of very suspicious bread. Your ale is poured next, into a mug that looks clean if you squint. It foams just enough to count, and smells faintly of apples and stronger decisions. She pushes it across without a word. You thank her. She doesn't respond, but her eyebrow arches just enough to say, "Of course you do." Back at your table, you settle the bowl and mug before you like sacred offerings. The stew steams gently. It's thicker than water, thinner than porridge, and it smells oddly comforting. You grab a spoon, test the temperature, and take the first bite. It's not great. But it's hot, it's filling, and in this tavern that might as well be a feast. You stare down into your bowl, cautiously hopeful. The surface of the stew glistens in the firelight with a layer of fat that swirls hypnotically when stirred. Bits float within, some familiar, some deeply mysterious. A lump of something orange that might be carrot. A chunk of something grey that you convince yourself is root vegetable. Something stringy that could be meat or a particularly confident leek. You lift the spoon and bring it to your mouth. The flavor lands with a thud. It's earthy, hearty, vaguely peppery with a back note of ash and nostalgia. It tastes like someone boiled ambition, added some sorrow, and then forgot it on the hearth for 2 hours. But it's warm, and it fills the corners of your stomach that road bread never quite reached. As you chew thoughtfully, you notice that stew in this tavern is less a meal and more a communal ritual. Every patron around you is engaged in the same performance. A bite, a pause, a slight nod, occasionally a raised eyebrow when a texture surprises. No one complains. Complaints here are for people with options. You glance to your left. The man with the felt hat is holding his spoon like a divining rod, fishing for specific pieces. He grins when he finds a lump of what he claims is smoked duck. You don't question it. Faith is part of the process. To your right, a woman dips her bread directly into the bowl, then offers a bite to the dog curled under the bench. It accepts with enthusiasm and zero hesitation. You wonder if this is a good sign or a terrible one. The dog licks its lips and immediately resumes napping, tail thumping once in contentment. Either way, you continue eating. Somewhere nearby, a patron raises their spoon and declares, "Could use more garlic." Another counters, "It's got garlic, you just can't see it." A few others laugh. One man mutters, "I can see it just fine," while spitting something fibrous into a napkin. Despite the critique, no one stops eating. The stew is a constant, unchanging, unapologetic, and entirely too central to complain about. It's the glue that holds the tavern together, possibly literally. You find yourself adapting. You avoid the harder bits. You learn to chew slowly in case something has bones. You dip your bread with precision, using it to scoop rather than soak. No one wants to end up with soggy crumbs on their cloak. The texture thickens as you near the bottom of the bowl, where the ingredients have settled into a sedimentary layer of flavor and mild regret. Eventually you lean back, bowl empty. You're not full exactly, but you're no longer hollow. Your stomach hums with warmth and your hands are busy with the comfort of holding a mug. The stew wasn't excellent. It wasn't even good. But it was here, and it did its job. And in this creaky, smoky, generous little tavern, that's more than enough. You lift the tankard, still warm from the tavern keeper's hand, and peer into its frothy depths. The ale has a cloudy amber hue, and the sort of aroma that suggests it's both recently brewed and slightly sentient. It smells of damp wood, toasted grain, and a hint of something tangy, like apples that got tired of waiting to be cider. The first sip surprises you. Not because it's particularly good, but because it's strangely complex. There's a malty warmth that rolls across your tongue like a soft wool blanket, followed quickly by a sharp nip that makes you blink. Somewhere in there is the ghost of honey and a firm handshake from something bitter. You swallow, nod once to no one in particular, and sip again. The second sip goes down smoother. Your mouth has already begun negotiating with your expectations. The tavern's ale is brewed on site, you gather, probably in a shed out back or under the stairs. Every tavern has its own recipe, often passed down for generations or invented after a storm flooded the cellar, and they decided to ferment whatever floated. This batch likely includes barley, rainwater, wild yeast, and the faint essence of oak from the barrels stacked behind the bar, some of which are likely older than the reigning monarch. Across the room, tankards clink with camaraderie. They vary in size, shape, and cleanliness. Some are dented pewter, others carved wood with iron bands. One man drinks from what appears to be a repurposed soup bowl with a handle nailed on. No one judges. What matters is the drink, not the delivery system. Refills are frequent. Patrons signal with a wave, a nod, or, in the case of one particularly assertive man, a full-body lean accompanied by a sharp whistle. The barmaid responds with mechanical efficiency, carrying several mugs at once, balanced with the confidence of someone who's seen worse things than a spilled drink. The ale has a tendency to loosen tongues. You notice the volume in the room ticking upward, like a tide rising by degrees. Laughter becomes louder. Stories get bolder. A man near the fireplace begins describing how he once outran a wild boar with nothing but a carrot and a prayer. His friend corrects him. It was a goat, and he tripped over his own boot. Both stories are accepted with equal delight. The ale works its quiet magic on you too. Your limbs begin to feel looser. The fire glows brighter. Your thoughts slow, pleasantly fuzzed around the edges. You're not drunk. Not yet. But you're certainly warmed. The kind of warm that seeps into your bones and tells you everything can wait until morning. You take another long sip. The froth clings to your upper lip. You wipe it away with the back of your sleeve, as tradition demands. The ale may not be refined, but it's real. It's honest. It's what this place offers best. Something strong, slightly mysterious, and made by hand. And somehow, it tastes better the more you stop asking questions. You glance back into your stew bowl, hoping for one last scoop of anything vaguely recognizable, only to find the murky broth now revealing some of its stranger secrets. A curl of something rubbery bobs to the surface. It might be onion skin. It might be eel. You prod it with your spoon. It curls back, almost offended. You leave it alone. Then there's the chunk that looks like a piece of bread but doesn't behave like one. It's dense, resistant to your spoon, and gives slightly under pressure, like an old potato holding a grudge. You taste it. It has the texture of sponge and the flavor of boiled nothing. You suspect it was added purely for ballast. Every bite of stew you thought you understood suddenly seems to hide something new. There's a seed you don't recall seeing earlier. A reddish thread you hope is saffron, but no, deep down, is just beetroot ambition. Something gelatinous wobbles at the bottom, a reminder that tavern stew has no rules, only ingredients. The man next to you peers into his own bowl and shrugs. "Found a feather in mine," he mutters cheerfully. "Means it's fresh." Across from him, a woman holds up a small curved object and squints. "Clove or hoof?" she asks. No one answers. The tavern accepts both as valid options. You begin to realize that stew here isn't about flavor. It's about experience. It's a conversation starter, a bravery test, and a communal shrug all in one. Everyone eats it. Everyone questions it. No one stops ordering it. You imagine the tavern keeper behind the bar, ladling from a cauldron that hasn't been emptied in years, just topped off daily like some kind of mystical broth of perpetual ingredients. You find yourself speculating about the stew's origins. Was it once a noble recipe? Did someone, long ago, drop a cookbook into a cauldron and decide to roll with it? Or has it always been this way? An evolving dish made of leftovers, luck, and local guesses. Despite the strange bits, you finish it. Every last scoop. Why? Because it's warm. Because it's filling. Because in a room full of strangers slowly becoming familiar, it feels like a rite of passage. You survived the stew. You're now part of the club. You lean back in your stool, bowl empty, tongue searching your teeth for mystery particles. A crumb clings stubbornly to your lip. You wipe it away with the back of your hand and notice you're not the only one doing so. Across the tavern, similar motions. Mouths smacking, sleeves wiping, mugs lifting. It's like a dance. timed by digestion and mild confusion. A man near the hearth burps impressively, gets a round of applause and bows as if accepting an award. Someone suggests dessert. Everyone laughs. There is no dessert. Just more stew, if you're feeling brave. And maybe another tankard to wash down whatever just crunched unexpectedly in your last bite. You smile, slightly worried about your molar, but mostly content. It starts with a cough, then a single string, plucked just once. A hesitant twang, slightly off-key, echoing into the hum of conversation, like a pebble tossed into soup. You glance toward the corner of the tavern, where a small platform, barely raised above the rest of the floor, has begun to host what can generously be described as a musical ensemble. The hurdy-gurdy player arrives first, lugging his instrument like it personally wronged him. He plunks down on a stool and begins tuning by ear, which would be admirable if his ears agreed with each other. The droning wheel spins, the strings whine like hungover cats. He winces, adjusts, tries again, marginally better. He nods to himself as if to say, "Close enough," and gives the tavern a grim nod of readiness. Next comes a boy with a fife, possibly the tavern keeper's nephew, judging by his determined expression and the faint scent of wood polish still clinging to his tunic. He plays a few sharp testing notes. One squeaks and causes several heads to turn. A man at the next table groans, "Not the fife again." The boy smiles defiantly. The fife is happening. Lastly, a woman with wild grey hair and an equally wild-looking drum joins them. She sits cross-legged, slaps the drum experimentally, then announces to no one in particular, "I'll keep time until the ale kicks in." You believe her. She looks like she's survived 3 marriages and at least 1 goat-related legal dispute. The trio begins. Slowly, cautiously. The hurdy-gurdy grinds out a warbling drone. The fife tries to find a tune somewhere within its own shrillness, and the drum lands like misplaced punctuation. It's less a performance and more an argument between instruments. But despite the chaos, it works. Somehow. It fits. It has that charming, lopsided energy of friends playing music not to impress, but simply to fill the air. Around you, conversations continue, but now with a bounce. Tankards thump to the rhythm. Boots tap unconsciously under tables. Even the firelight seems to flicker in time, casting dancing shadows across beams and faces. One of the patrons near you joins in, thumping a spoon against a mug in time with the drum. Another adds a low hum, entirely off-key but deeply committed. A dog barks once, perfectly in time with a sudden cymbal clash, and earns a cheer. No one's clapping. No one's pretending it's great. But there's laughter, and there's motion. The music may be enthusiastic rather than elegant, but it's theirs. You catch yourself nodding along, smiling despite yourself. There's a beauty in the imperfection, an invitation not to judge, but to join. And just as you think it can't get any more chaotic, the fife squeaks again, loud, shrill, and proud. The boy beams. Someone across the room groans into their stew. The music continues. And the night deepens with every offbeat note. The music evolves. Well, perhaps evolves is too ambitious a word. Let's say it mutates. The hurdy-gurdy drones a little louder. The fife settles into a vaguely repeating pattern, and the drum begins issuing something like a rhythm. Then, without warning, the tavern begins to sing. Not in unison. Not all at once. More like scattered raindrops across a tin roof. Bits of lyrics emerging from various tables. Verses trailing off only to be picked up by someone else who may or may not know the next line. It's not clear if everyone's singing the same song, or if the tavern simply operates under a shared delusion that melody is optional. You catch phrases here and there. Something about a goat on a hill, a lady who baked her husband into a pie, and a merchant who traded his shoes for soup. There are hand motions involved. Someone gestures dramatically with a leg of roast. Others slap the table on certain words, like punctuation delivered with roast gravy. You don't know the lyrics. Of course you don't. No one really knows them. These songs live in the bones of the tavern, passed along through ears slightly drunk and mouths even drunker. They change from night to night, morphing like folklore told through froth and laughter. Someone next to you leans in and slurs, "Just sing something. As long as it rhymes, you're in." So you do. Tentatively at first, maybe just a hum or a few muttered syllables. Then louder, bolder, you rhyme beer with ear and earn a cheer. You try chicken with kitchen and get a supportive slap on the back. You're not good, but you're present. And in a medieval tavern, presence is better than pitch. There's a woman a few tables over who has apparently decided she does know the verses and sings them with the confident fervor of someone who once auditioned for a traveling minstrel troupe. She adds flourishes, vibrato, and dramatic arm waves. At one point, she balances her mug on her head mid-verse. The room erupts. Her voice cracks gloriously, and it only adds to the charm. The barmaid joins in while refilling mugs, slipping in lines between sloshing ale. The boy with the fife plays louder, possibly trying to out-sing the dog now howling along under the hearth bench. Someone in the back adds a stomp rhythm by banging a boot against the floor until the boot comes off and he throws it onto the table in triumph. A mug follows. A sausage. Then someone else's hat. The whole room is alive, throbbing with voices and laughter. And somehow, despite the off-key notes and forgotten verses, it feels like a single heartbeat. You find yourself swaying, maybe even harmonizing if only in your own head. And for a few magical, chaotic minutes, you're part of something bigger, sillier, and wonderfully loud. Then the verse ends. A final drum beat. Scattered cheers. Someone hiccups. And then, just like that, the song fades into murmurs, replaced by clinking mugs and satisfied grins. Just when you think the night's musical chaos has found its full shape, fife, hurdy-gurdy, thumping drum, and the occasional enthusiastic spoon, the tavern surprises you. A new sound creeps into the room, subtle at first, like a whiny buzz from behind the barrels. It rises in pitch. Then rhythm. Then full presence. You turn your head and spot the source. An elderly man in a crooked hat, proudly producing long, droning notes from what looks like a length of hollowed-out bone strung with reeds. It could be an ancient flute. Or maybe a misunderstood plumbing tool. Either way, it sings, or rather honks, with stubborn joy. He toots a three-note melody and beams, proud as a rooster who's found the sun. Another guest joins in with a peculiar hand-cranked contraption strapped to her chest. It's a series of bells and pulleys that seem to clang when she wiggles her knees. No one questions it. The sounds fit, sort of. They clang in a minor key, one clearly invented on the spot. A man near the hearth begins tapping on two tankards with polished antlers. The rhythm is creative. His friends cheer him on. Somewhere behind you, a young girl bangs on what might be a saucepan or a decommissioned helmet. It resonates with a twangy ring each time her wooden spoon lands. The dog yelps in support, then settles back down with a harumph that seems strangely on beat. You lean over to ask someone if this is normal. They nod solemnly. That's Gunda's bone flute. He only plays it when the stew was especially weird. Which tracks. Tonight's stew was especially weird. The tavern is now a chorus of instruments that defy categorization. Stringed things, clacky things, items once used for warfare or livestock management, now repurposed as musical tools. None of them are in tune. None of them match tempo. And yet, in the grand soup of sound, it somehow feels right. It's not about harmony. It's about spirit. And everyone here is very much in possession of that, if not pitch. The minstrel from earlier hops up with a triangle, gives it a dignified ding, and bows as though he's closed a symphony. He has not. The room erupts into laughter and off-key echo dings. One man lifts his tankard and uses it like a bell. Another taps his knife on the rim of his plate until the tavern keeper shouts, "Break it, and you'll eat stew with your hands." You try clapping in time and immediately realize that time is a flexible concept here. But no one minds. A small child hands you a stick and gestures to the wall. You find a wooden beam and gently tap. It sounds like applause from an old oak tree. For one brief, ridiculous stretch of the evening, everyone is a musician. Everyone contributes. Every clang, buzz, twang, and thud is welcome. You can't explain why it works. It just does. Eventually, the music stops demanding attention. Not because it ends. Oh no, it never really ends. But because it weaves itself into the fabric of the tavern so seamlessly that you stop noticing it outright. It becomes less of a performance and more of an atmosphere. Like the crackle of the fire or the low hum of conversation, the music just is. The fife no longer screeches. It trills softly in a wandering melody that rises and falls like a drunk bird meandering home. The hurdy-gurdy has settled into a droning lull that could be mistaken for the wind, if the wind had a passion for low-frequency vibrations. The drum pulses gently now, like the tavern's heartbeat, steady, imperfect, but soothing. You find yourself relaxing in new ways. The music isn't asking anything of you. It's not trying to impress or surprise. It's simply there, looping softly under the evening stories. It makes the jokes a little warmer, the silences a little deeper. Even the stew tastes slightly better with a rhythm behind it. A woman by the hearth sings quietly to herself, not for the room, just for her table. Her voice is low and slightly raspy, like someone who's laughed too much and slept too little. You catch only fragments. A shepherd lost in the hills, a jealous star, a girl who turned into a goose. It's nonsense. Beautiful nonsense, and you love it. Someone taps their foot. Someone else hums a counter melody. It's not choreographed, it's instinct. The clatter of a mug being set down syncs with a drum beat. A snort of laughter aligns with a hurdy-gurdy squeal. Even the dog, now asleep, lets out a snore perfectly timed with a low note from the bone flute. You're not imagining it. The tavern itself is keeping rhythm. You look around. The glow from the hearth reflects in half-empty mugs. Eyes are softer now, lids drooping with drink and warmth. Cloaks are draped over shoulders. Boots are stretched toward the fire. Hands rest on table edges or cradle bread crusts like treasures. And over all of it, the music floats. Not loud, not intrusive, but ever present. It's like the room has exhaled. You stop tapping your fingers. You just listen. Not closely, not sharply. Just gently. The way one listens to waves at night or to the buzz of crickets in summer. It isn't music that keeps you awake. It's music that lets you fall asleep without noticing. And then the fife pauses. The hurdy-gurdy drifts into silence. The drum gives one final thump and is stilled by its player's palm. No fanfare. No applause. Just a shared sigh from the room, like a page turning in a very old book. Someone murmurs, "That was nice." Another says, "Better than last night." A third adds, "I liked the goose part." You chuckle softly and lean back into your stool. The fire crackles. The tavern breathes. And the silence that follows the music is somehow musical too. In one corner of the tavern, near a table permanently tilted just enough to make drinks slide toward the edge, a group gathers around a well-worn game of dice. You don't hear them before you see them. Then suddenly, clatter, cheer, groan, accusation. Laughter erupts. Someone bangs a fist on the table, and a wooden die rolls off and vanishes into the straw-covered floor like a tiny runaway criminal. You wander closer, mug in hand, and take in the scene. 4 players sit around the warped table, eyes sharp, smiles sharper. Their names don't matter, though you quickly invent some for your own amusement. Grizzled beard, nervous cap, crooked smile, and the one with suspiciously clean hands. The dice themselves are handmade, carved bone or wood, maybe a mix. No two are quite the same size. One is noticeably rounded on one corner, a lucky roll according to Crooked Smile. When you ask how to play, they all respond at once with different rules. The game apparently is called Scarp, though no one agrees on why or what that stands for. The object of the game seems simple enough. Roll high, or roll low, or match something someone else rolls. Or avoid it entirely. It depends on who's explaining it and how many ales they've had. Points are awarded arbitrarily. Penalties are shouted and occasionally invented mid-round. 3 sixes beats a flush, someone declares. Flushes are only in cards, another argues. "Then I win both games," comes the reply. You're offered a seat. You decline for now, partly out of caution, partly because you sense this is the kind of game one must first survive observationally. Besides, half the fun is watching. The table creaks under elbows and slams. Tankards wobble dangerously close to spilling. The dice bounce across the surface, ricochet off fingers, and land with dramatic thuds. A roll goes against Grizzled Beard, and he narrows his eyes at Crooked Smile, accusing him of thumb spinning. Crooked Smile denies it with a grin that confesses everything. They argue in mock serious tones. Suspiciously, Clean Hands remains utterly silent, rolling dice with smooth grace, winning steadily. You wonder what his secret is. Weighted dice? A pact with the ale spirits? Simply being good? All equally likely. A small crowd gathers. Bets are made, not just on the game, but on who will accuse whom next. The barkeep casually places a pickled egg on the table beside Nervous Cap, saying, "Incentive." Nervous Cap rolls, gets 2 ones, and groans as the egg is claimed by another. You sip your ale and smile. This game, whatever its rules may be, is not about winning. It's about drama, about ritual, about turning a handful of old dice into an evening's worth of legends. And the cheating? That's just part of the tradition. It's not about being caught. It's about being clever enough that no one minds. You make a mental note. Maybe next round you'll play, but only if you can borrow some suspiciously clean hands. Just as you're starting to follow the strange rhythm of the dice game, a sudden commotion breaks out 2 tables over. There's a loud flutter, a shout, a clatter of mugs, and then, there it is, a chicken on the table. Not near the table, on it. Standing squarely on a stew bowl with the confidence of a baron surveying their estate. The tavern doesn't react in shock. In fact, several patrons don't look up at all. One mutters, she's early tonight." Another just sighs and scoots his plate over. You blink. The chicken flaps once, hops across a wooden trencher, narrowly misses a candle, and lands beside someone's bread. It pecks twice, decisively, then steals a crust and flutters off the table, like it was always part of the plan. Someone shouts, "That's house chicken property!" This sparks laughter from half the room. Apparently, this particular chicken has a reputation. She's referred to variously as Lady Cluckington, Feathers the Fifth, and, inexplicably, the Governor. You watch, captivated, as the chicken struts around like she owns the lease. She hops onto a stool, then onto a bench, narrowly dodging the elbow of a man who is too deep in his mug to care. Her beady eyes sweep the room, evaluating meals and people alike. Crooked Smile from the dice game attempts to tempt her with a bit of sausage. "Want to wager, my lady?" he croons, holding it out. The chicken eyes the offering, then pecks his finger. Hard. He yelps. She claims the sausage anyway and struts off in triumph. Someone suggests placing bets on her next perch. 3 copper says she lands on the mantel. 4 says she goes for the drummer's knee again. She likes height, someone explains, as if analyzing a prized falcon. You don't bet, but you're quietly rooting for the drum. A new song is struck up in her honor. It's entirely improvised, involves rhyming hen with when and again, and ends with a heroic stanza about a daring bread heist. The drummer adds an overly dramatic rhythm. The fife squeals. Someone attempts to harmonize with a hiccup. The tavern keeper, upon seeing the chicken perched beside the fireplace, sighs deeply, but does nothing. "Better her than rats," she mutters, pouring another ale. Apparently, in this hierarchy, the chicken outranks certain guests. Eventually, the chicken makes her final move. With a majestic flap, she takes off from the beam above the hearth and lands directly in a man's lap. He startles, then grins like he's just been chosen by royalty. She nestles in, satisfied, pecking gently at the hem of his cloak, before settling down as though she paid rent for that spot. You shake your head, half laughing, fully charmed. This place is madness. Warm, sticky, musical madness. And the chicken? Well, she's clearly part of the staff. You sip your ale, look around and think, honestly, this is better than theater. And the chicken clucks once, as if to agree. Back at the dice table, the game continues, though now with slightly more chicken feathers floating around than before. You take another sip of your ale, watching the players hunch in, eyes narrowed, hands suspiciously poised. The mood is tense, but not serious. It's the kind of tension you find in a room where everyone wants to catch someone cheating, just to see how artfully it's done. And make no mistake, there is cheating, not the clumsy, obvious kind. No one's swapping dice under the table or palming aces. No, this is the subtle, theatrical, almost ceremonial kind of cheating that requires flair and, ideally, plausible deniability. Crooked Smile scratches his neck while rolling, flicking the dice with his pinky in a suspiciously practiced motion. They land in his favor. He offers an exaggerated shrug. Fortune loves the clean-hearted. Grizzled Beard snorts, muttering something about cursed goats and thumb-flicking, but doesn't challenge the roll. Nervous Cap leans back and accidentally bumps the table just as suspiciously Clean Hands rolls. The dice tumble onto the floor. "Oh dear," says Nervous Cap, wide-eyed. The room watches in silence as he retrieves them and hands them back. No one's sure if the dice changed, or if anything changed, but a note of suspicion hangs in the air like steam over soup. The most elegant act of the night, however, comes from a woman known only as Marla Two Spoons. No one knows why. She uses only one spoon, and rarely even that. But the nickname has stuck. She plays with poise, always rolling with both hands flat on the table, smiling as if the game is secondary to some greater joy. When questioned about a particularly lucky streak, she replies, "Some of us are blessed by chance, others by charm." The way she says it makes you half believe both apply. You notice something odd about her rolls. The dice always seem to settle on high numbers, even when bumped or jostled. You glance closer and realize her rings, large, ornate, and likely older than the Tavern, have faint grooves that could, if pressed just right, guide a die's roll ever so slightly. It's genius, it's devious, it's beautiful. No one calls her out. Maybe they've noticed too. Maybe they haven't. Or maybe, as is the unspoken rule in places like this, a little well-crafted cheating is simply part of the entertainment. In fact, the only real rule seems to be, if you're caught, make it funny. Earlier, someone attempted a sleight of hand and was immediately pelted with breadcrumbs. He bowed and offered to buy a round for the table. Laughter followed. Cheating forgiven. Life moves on. You find yourself wondering how many of the games you've played, dice or otherwise, were just performances like this. Not contests of skill, but of character. Not about who wins, but how they play. And here, in this smoky little corner of a wonky-beamed world, you begin to understand. Sometimes cheating isn't the scandal. Sometimes it's the show. At some point, you notice the dice haven't rolled in a while. They're still there, nestled in the center of the table like sleepy little bones, but no one's touching them. The game, scarp or whatever it was, is forgotten. Not officially, no announcement, no dramatic pause. Just drifted away, like a candle burned too low to cast light. The players are still gathered, but now they're telling stories, leaning back in their chairs, finishing the crumbs of what might have once been bread. Grizzled Beard is launching into a tale about the time he outran a cartload of turnips on a hill, too steep for its own good. Everyone listens, not because they believe it, but because he tells it well. You suspect the turnips grew larger each time he recounts it. Marla Two Spoons is leaning over her mug, laughing at something Crooked Smile just whispered. Nervous Cap is no longer nervous, just comfortably slouched, his cap askew in a way that says, "We've made peace, me and this hat." Even suspiciously clean hands has dirt under one fingernail now, as if the tavern's ambiance has finally claimed him. You realize the game was never the point. It was just the spark. A reason to gather, to laugh, to gently accuse and be accused. The cheating, the dice, the table, all props in a larger ritual, the art of being together without purpose. Conversation flows like the ale, easy, warm, slightly unpredictable. Someone reminisces about a pig that could count. Another person claims they once courted a nun, only to find she was actually a chimney sweep with lofty dreams. The facts are secondary. The stories matter more. The tavern embraces this mood. The fire crackles softly, casting a golden blur over the warped floorboards. Someone strums a lazy chord on a lute. No song, just idle fingers remembering the shape of melody. A barmaid passes by, swapping out a mug for a fresh one with the smooth efficiency of someone who knows precisely when a drink has outstayed its welcome. Outside, wind presses against the shutters, but no one pays it any mind. In here, the world is smaller, simpler, safer. Just the low drone of talk, the occasional laugh, and the comforting weight of a tankard resting on old wood. You look down and realize the dice are in your hand. When did that happen? You roll them across the table, and they clack softly to a stop. 2 threes. No one reacts, no one keeps score. but Crooked Smile nods and says, "A fine roll, stranger." Shame it came too late. You grin, because it didn't come too late. It came exactly when it was supposed to. And as the candle stubs melt into waxy puddles, and the dog shifts in its sleep, and someone begins humming the refrain to a song you don't know but wish you did, you lean back, because the game might have ended, but the night hasn't. You begin to notice it in the pauses, those split-second silences tucked between laughter and storytelling, where someone leans just slightly too close to someone else, and suddenly the air hums with awkward courage. Welcome to the gentle, chaotic theater of medieval flirting. It's not smooth. It's not poetic. It's not particularly successful. But it is earnest, and that counts for something. At the table nearest the hearth, a young man with a haircut that suggests bravery but not accuracy is attempting to impress a barmaid. He leans forward, elbows on the table, and declares, "I once wrestled a swan." She raises an eyebrow. "Why?" He blinks. "It insulted my sister." There's a beat. She snorts, grabs his empty mug, and walks off, muttering, "Swan botherer." He grins like he's won a duel. Maybe, in his mind, he has. At another table, a woman in a deep blue cloak lifts a spoonful of stew and offers it across the table. "Try this," she says to the man opposite her. "Tell me if it tastes like sadness or goat." He leans in, takes the bite, chews thoughtfully. "Definitely goat," he replies. Their eyes meet over the bowl, a shared laugh. That might just be love, or at least stew-based affection. In the corner, a musician is tuning his lute while maintaining eye contact with a girl who has been pretending not to watch him for the past half hour. He plucks a note, then another, launching into a soft tune that wobbles slightly, but lands well enough. She finally looks up and he says, "Wrote that one just now. About your eyes." She replies, "Sounds more like my goat in a thunderstorm." He beams. "Then it's perfect." She rolls her eyes, but she doesn't walk away. You realize quickly that medieval courtship isn't about roses and recited verse. It's about presence, about trying, about saying something mildly ridiculous and hoping it lands better than your last haircut. There's a bravery in it, not the sword-swinging kind, but the type that asks, "Will you laugh at me or with me?" Occasionally, the flirting takes the form of an offering, a slightly burnt crust of bread, the less watery half of a stew bowl, a seat closer to the fire. These are not grand gestures, but they matter. In a place where comfort is rare and shared space means something, even small kindnesses carry weight. And of course, not all attempts go well. A man at the bar raises his mug toward the tavern keeper and winks. She glances over, smiles sweetly, and then refills someone else's tankard first. The room laughs. He takes it in stride. "Worth a try," he says. "Maybe next year." You smile into your own drink, because here, flirting isn't a game to win. It's a dance. A clumsy, lovely, ale-fueled dance where the reward isn't always romance, but sometimes just being seen. And that's more than enough. It begins, as these things always do, with something incredibly minor. A nudge, a wobble, and the unmistakable splash of ale cascading across a table. A man gasps. A mug wobbles. Bread soaks. And somewhere, deep in the corner of the tavern's collective soul, the first chord of a familiar old tune is struck. Not from the hurdy-gurdy this time, but from human pride. The man whose drink was spilled looks down slowly, as if hoping it was just his imagination. It was not. His sleeve is now damp and dripping, the bread before him a casualty of war. Across from him the culprit, a wiry youth with a grin 2 seconds too wide, raises his hands in mock surrender. "Didn't see your elbow there," he says. "It was attached to my arm," the man replies, voice low and flat. Nearby patrons turn subtly in their seats, pretending not to watch. This is tavern tension, a spectator sport. No one wants it to escalate, but if it does, well, they're not looking away. "You could have apologized," the damp one says. "I could have," the youth replies, not quite smirking. "Didn't feel like it." That's the moment. Not the splash, not the ruined bread, but the refusal. Pride straightens spines. Old arguments flare behind eyes. The room holds its breath, just enough to make the fire crackle louder. Then, a veteran of these kinds of dramas, an older woman in a cloak patched more than cloth, clears her throat loudly. "Oh, for mercy's sake," she barks. "If we dueled every time ale hit the table, we'd all have 1 ear and half a liver." A few chuckles. Tension softens, but not entirely. The youth still stands. So does the damp man. They are now locked in a strange kind of silence duel, measured not in swords but in stares and jaw clenching. Then, just as the room braces for furniture to shift and mugs to scatter, the tavern keeper appears. She doesn't speak. She just walks between them, places a full mug before the damp man, then looks at the youth. "You spill another without saying sorry," she says. "You're mopping this floor with your socks." And there's a lot of floor. Her voice is calm, even warm, but the threat lingers in the air like wood smoke. The youth blinks. He nods. Fair enough. The damp man takes his new drink. No cheers, no handshake, but also no brawl. The room breathes again. Someone near the hearth mutters, "Almost had a good one there." Another replies, "Still time." They both sip and settle back in. You realize that in this tavern, feuds are part of the furniture. They flare, they flicker, they cool. Sometimes they pop like embers and fade, and sometimes, if you're not careful, they burn. But tonight, thanks to a quick refill and a well-timed threat, this one fizzles out into nothing more than soggy bread and a story that will be retold with embellishment by breakfast. A little later in the evening, once the stew has settled and the ale has softened most tempers, another kind of feud makes itself known. Not the kind born from a spilled drink or a misplaced elbow. No, this one is older. Deeper. The kind of rivalry that lingers like a family curse or a misplaced recipe for turnip wine. It begins when one old man clears his throat and says, far too loudly, "Of course, the East Field was never meant for barley." Too damp. Silence follows, but it's a loaded silence, like someone just whispered a challenge at a royal banquet. All heads nearby tilt. A few even brace. Across the room, another elder, wrapped in layers that suggest a wardrobe entirely built of discarded cloaks, answers slowly. "That damp barley won you second place in the harvest fair of '82, if I recall." "You recall wrong," the first man shoots back, rising slightly from his chair. "That was oats. The barley went to the monks for brewing." Better use of it, anyway. A low rumble of interest moves through the tavern. People love a good, long-standing feud, especially when the stakes are agriculturally insignificant. These two, locals know them as Old Bram and Linnet the Liar, have been circling each other for decades. Not with fists or swords, but with loud memories and strategic forgetfulness. Someone nudges your elbow and whispers, "They've argued about that barley every winter since I was small." You glance back at the pair. Neither looks particularly angry, just determined. Like two historians fighting over the pronunciation of a word no one else can hear. Bram, not to be outdone, brings out a folded bit of parchment from his satchel. "Got it in writing, see?" "The records from the village scribe." He waves the crinkled paper with the pride of someone revealing royal lineage. Linnet narrows his eyes. That's your old grocery list. And yet more accurate than your memory, Bram shoots back. A cheer rises from the room, not mocking, not hostile, just appreciative. This is performance now, well rehearsed. Familiar. The two men may genuinely disagree, but they also know the dance. It ends, as it always does, with Bram gesturing for another mug and Linnet muttering something about delusional old shepherds. A few patrons clap. The tension dissolves. You realize this is the tavern's rhythm, not just the ale and stew and sputtering music, but these little feuds, the rituals of pride and familiarity. Like the chicken wandering through meals, the half-sung ballads, the unclaimed spoons on tabletops, these rivalries are part of the charm. They aren't meant to be solved. Just played. Like tavern games with no rules, no real winners, and an audience that knows exactly when to laugh. And as Bram and Linnet each raise their mugs, still frowning, still muttering, you can't help but feel oddly comforted. Not everything in life needs fixing. Some things just need repeating. Later in the evening, the tavern takes on that slow, golden glow, the one that happens after the third round of ale, when the fire feels closer, the jokes get gentler, and even the straw on the floor seems to relax. And right at that moment, another argument sparks up, this one quieter, smaller, but with the kind of sharpness that suggests two people have been waiting all night to poke at an old wound. It's between two women at a corner table, each probably in her 50s, each with the sturdy build of someone who's hauled more buckets than scrolls, and each glaring at the other like the stew just insulted their ancestry. "Your sister still owes me a chicken," one says flatly. The other sips from her mug. "You sold her a deaf chicken. She never said it was for guard duty. I said it was for the garden. You said protection." The room goes quiet, not dramatically, just enough to tilt its ears in their direction. They go back and forth. About the chicken, about a borrowed cloak that was never returned, about a wedding speech that apparently included a joke that went 3 lines too far. It's not vicious, it's precise. Each woman knows exactly which phrase to use, which moment to recall, which memory to twist. There's a certain poetry to it, a tavern duet sung in the key of resentment. And just when it feels like it might tip, just when the air tightens and a mug is held a little too high, one of them bursts out laughing. It's sudden, loud, the kind of laugh that's been waiting in the lungs for 10 years. "You do know it was a rooster, right?" she says through her chuckles. "Wouldn't shut up, deaf, but still screamed at the moon." The other woman blinks. Then she laughs too. "That rooster woke the whole village for a month." She pauses. "I named him Gregory." Mugs are raised. The room exhales. Someone near the hearth claps. Another shouts, "To Gregory!" And just like that, a toast erupts. To roosters, to wedding speeches, to never giving back cloaks, to bad memory and worse stew. The whole tavern joins in, everyone raising mugs, half full or mostly foam, laughing through sips and sloshes. The women clink their cups with practiced hands, the argument forgotten, or perhaps remembered better now that it's been aired out in laughter and ale. You watch all this unfold and think, this is how feuds end here. Not with apologies, not with long letters or mended fences, but with toasts. With shared stories, with the sudden, miraculous memory that once, long ago, you both laughed at the same terrible joke. As the fire pops and Gregory the rooster becomes the unofficial mascot of the evening, you find yourself joining the cheer even though you didn't understand half of what was said. Because sometimes peace comes not from forgiveness, but from remembering why the fight was funny in the first place. Eventually, the night takes its toll. Your limbs get heavier, your mug emptier, and the tavern's noise begins to feel more like a blanket than a bustle. You're full, mostly of stew and whatever that suspicious chunk was, and your body begins to send polite signals that it might like to lie horizontal for a few hours. So, you ask the tavern keeper about a bed. She gestures with a tilt of the chin. Upstairs. Mind the third step. It's more decorative than structural. You thank her. She doesn't hear you. Or if she does, she chooses not to acknowledge courtesy after midnight. That seems fair. You head toward the narrow staircase near the back of the room, passing a pair of patrons slumped shoulder to shoulder, fast asleep in positions no human spine should survive. One of them snores through his nose and out his mouth, a kind of looped system that sounds like a broken bellows. The stairs loom ahead, lit by a single wall sconce and an optimistic candle that seems unsure about continuing its shift. You place your hand on the banister, curved like a crooked spine and polished by centuries of equally tired hands, and begin your ascent. The first step groans under your boot. The second seems to sigh. The third, well, you remember the warning just in time. It dips dramatically under your weight and gives an alarming creak that sounds oddly personal. You skip to the fourth, which mercifully holds. The staircase curves slightly, not because it was designed that way, but because the building has settled like a retired knight with a bad hip. You hold your breath as you climb, not out of fear, but out of respect for the timber's effort to still behave like stairs. Halfway up, you meet someone coming down. You both pause, blinking at each other. It's an unspoken agreement. The more vertical party wins. You, swaying slightly with the elegance of a drunken lamppost, back up a step to let them pass. They nod their thanks. You both move on. At the top, a narrow hallway greets you with doors of various shapes and temperaments. One has a sock on the handle. Another has what looks like a chicken feather jammed in the keyhole. You steer clear of both. A chalkboard nailed to the wall lists room assignments in barely legible scrawl. Beside your name, or maybe just an X in your general direction, is a number. Room 6, mine door, swells in humidity. You find it, wiggle the handle, and enter sideways just as the door groans its protest. The room is small. Sloped ceiling, a bed, a jug of water. A tiny window admitting the faintest night breeze and the sound of someone below singing to their own hiccups. You're here. Upstairs. Upright, miraculously intact, and all that stands between you and sleep is the mattress. There it sits, the bed, more specifically the mattress, if you can call it that. At first glance, it resembles a large burlap sack that's been used as both a bed and a punching bag, lumpy, misshapen. One side looks like it's actively trying to escape the frame. You stare at it, unsure if you should approach slowly or offer it a coin. It smells faintly of hay, salt, and a long history of human decisions. Not bad exactly, just present. You lean in closer, sniff cautiously, and detect an underlying note of something herbal, maybe lavender, maybe mildew. There's also a hint of damp wool, which seems to be the tavern's signature scent, like some rustic cologne designed to evoke warm livestock with a splash of ale. You poke the surface. It responds like an overcooked turnip, squishy in the middle, firm at the edges, and unwilling to return to its original shape. You sit. The mattress sighs, then groans, then gives up entirely and sinks 2 inches lower than expected. You sway. It sways with you. It's stuffed with straw, that much is clear. Possibly some feathers, possibly socks. Possibly whatever filler the tavern had lying around after last winter. You try not to think about it too hard. It looks safe enough. You imagine the stories this mattress could tell if it weren't so tired, or if it hadn't already repressed everything for self-preservation. You lift the corner and discover a small, flat item underneath, a wedge of dried cheese wrapped in cloth. A forgotten snack? A guest's late-night strategy? You set it aside respectfully, unsure if disturbing it might void your right to sleep. There's one pillow, flat as a coin and slightly warm, despite no one being here all evening. You flip it over. It doesn't help. The blanket, meanwhile, is more a concept than a material. It's thin, woolen, and full of holes, like someone tried to knit warmth but got distracted halfway through. Still, it's something. You lie back, adjusting carefully. The mattress adjusts back, redistributing its contents like an opinionated crowd. A sharp piece of straw pokes your side, and you shift. Something crunches beneath your shoulder. Hopefully it was a leaf. Hopefully. Yet somehow it's not awful. Your body slowly melts into the uneven contours, your legs stretch, your back sighs. The ache in your shoulders eases under the oddly firm lump near your left hip. You begin to accept that comfort, in this time and place, is relative. From below, the muffled sounds of the tavern drift upward. Low laughter, the soft thud of boots, a closing door. The familiar rhythm of people winding down. You pull the blanket around you. It barely covers your knees and one shoulder, but it's warm. Or at least not cold. This mattress is not luxurious. It's not even polite. But it's yours for tonight. And in that wobbly, scratchy embrace, sleep starts to curl around the edges of your mind. You lie still, half buried in straw, half draped in a threadbare blanket, and realize the tavern does not go silent. It just changes key. The loud laughter has faded, the clink of mugs grown sparse, and the music has long since limped into memory. But in the hush that follows, a different kind of concert begins. From downstairs comes the gentle creak of timber, wood shifting, settling, groaning in that ancient language spoken only by buildings old enough to remember when shoes were optional. The beams above your head mutter in rhythm with the ones below your bed, and for a moment you feel like you're floating in a wooden hammock strung between centuries. A door squeaks somewhere down the hall, followed by the muffled thump of boots being kicked off with little grace and even less coordination. Someone bumps into a wall and says sorry to it. The wall does not reply. Snoring emerges, tentatively at first, then boldly. It rises from multiple directions like a symphony warming up. The person in the room next to you has the kind of snore that starts in the throat, but finishes somewhere in the rafters. There's another one, fainter, with an intermittent wheeze that sounds uncannily like a dying bagpipe. Somewhere below, a dog lets out a contented huff and resumes its rumbling rhythm, tail thudding once against the hearth. Wind sneaks through the cracked window, fluttering the rag that passes for a curtain. It whispers over the wooden floor like a storyteller searching for breath. Outside, a distant owl hoots once, then again, softer, as if unsure whether it's needed tonight. A latecomer stumbles up the stairs. You hear each tread protest under their boots, the brief pause at each landing, the quiet swear word at the top step. They reach their room, try the handle once, twice, then give up and sleep against the door. A minute later, soft snoring joins the hallway soundtrack. You shift slightly. The mattress sighs beneath you. Something pokes your hip, probably a pine needle. Or regret. Still, the warmth from the day lingers in the blanket. The smells of stew and smoke and old wood have soaked into your clothes, into your hair, into the corners of the room. It's not unpleasant, it's familiar, even if you've only just arrived. You listen to it all, not just with your ears, but with your whole body. The building breathes, the people dream. The world tilts gently into rest, and slowly, without ceremony, your thoughts begin to unravel. The day fades. The faces blur, the room softens. Sleep doesn't pounce here. It sneaks up like a cat across floorboards, brushing against your thoughts until they quiet. And just before you drift off entirely, you hear one last creak, almost like the tavern itself whispering, "You're safe." Sleep comes slowly, like a candle flickering low before giving in. The mattress stops fighting you. The blanket wraps you as best it can, and as the sounds of the tavern blur into distant murmurs, you begin to dream. Not the grand, sweeping dreams of heroes and dragons, but small, oddly specific ones. You dream of stew. Of course you do. A bowl the size of a wash basin, steaming gently, filled with familiar shapes that rearrange themselves each time you look. A floating carrot turns into a coin. A mushroom winks. The ladle is a sword or a spoon. You argue about it with the barmaid, who's also somehow the chicken, who tells you with great seriousness that Gregory was framed. The tavern in your dream is bigger than it should be, hallways unfolding like stories, stairs that climb into attics full of laughter and old boots. Patrons from earlier pass by you in slow motion, faces warm and blurred, like portraits half remembered. They toast to things that don't exist, to crooked chairs and honest liars, to the goat who got away. Each toast rings like a bell, and you float through the clinking sound like mist. At one point you're playing dice with a dog. It cheats. You don't mind. The floor tilts gently under you, not jarringly, but with the lazy sway of an old ship still moored but dreaming of the sea. The rafters above your bed creak in slow rhythm, matching the pull of your breathing. A breeze sneaks through the shutters, brushing your cheek like a mother smoothing a child's hair. You dream of bread warm from the oven and ale that glows blue, of tavern benches that stretch for miles and still find room for one more, of forgotten names whispered kindly, of lanterns lit just before dawn, of songs sung to snoring patrons and the steady thump of a drum played by time itself. Someone sings, a lullaby maybe. The words aren't clear. Just vowels and sleep wrapped together in rhythm. It might be in your dream, it might be real. You don't need to know. Your body curls slightly, finding the softest place among the straw and cloth. Your fingers twitch once. A smile flickers and fades. There is nothing urgent, no footsteps chasing, no chores to rise for. Just the warmth of walls that lean without falling, of beams that bow but hold. The tavern sways. The mattress sighs. The night hums gently around you like a low, endless chord. And even in dreams you feel it. You are inside something old, something kind, something that's seen storms and laughter and lonely travelers. And tonight it sees you. It starts with a creak. Not one of the familiar ones, not the floorboard under the chamber pot, not the groaning beam above your head. No, this creak is sharper, newer, the kind that doesn't belong to a sleepy building, but to something, someone, moving. You stir, not fully awake, not yet. Your mind floats between dreams and awareness, reluctant to commit to either, but the creak comes again, closer this time. A soft shuffle follows it, then a faint metallic jingle, like coins in a too small pouch or buckles dancing where they shouldn't be. You blink. The room is dark, though a strip of pre-dawn gray filters through the warped window. Shadows stretch across the floorboards like sleepy cats. For a moment you think maybe it was nothing, a gust of wind. The tavern settling, a dream left over from your midnight stew fantasy. Then the jingle returns. Clearer now. You sit up, slowly, carefully, in that stiff-legged, hay-stuck way that medieval mattresses demand. The blanket falls from your shoulders with a whisper. You scan the room. Nothing's moved. The door's still shut. The jug of water still sits on the crooked stool beside your bed. But something is different. Then you see it. The corner. The darkest one, between the bed and the door frame. A figure, still, watching. You freeze, they don't move, neither do you. A long, breathless moment passes, and then the figure steps slightly forward, just enough for the light to catch their face. It's a boy, no older than 12. Pale, freckled, with a mop of straw-colored hair and eyes like stormwater. He's holding a bundle, cloth wrapped around something lumpy, and his boots are caked in dried mud that flakes onto your floor with each movement. "Sorry," he says, voice thin but steady. "Didn't know this one was taken." You blink again. Words elude you. The boy shifts awkwardly, clutching the bundle tighter. "They usually don't rent this room," he adds. "I sleep here when it's empty." You nod slowly. The boy looks more apologetic than threatening, more cold than suspicious. And now, with the shock wearing off, the situation takes shape. He's not a thief, not a ghost. Just a kid, a regular bone-tired tavern child who's made a home out of borrowed corners. He doesn't leave, though. He hesitates at the door like he wants permission, or maybe a blanket. "Go on," you say gently, gesturing toward the bed. He hesitates, then shuffles to the opposite corner, curling up on the bare floorboards. The bundle becomes a pillow, the coat, a blanket. He doesn't speak again. Neither do you. The tavern sighs around you. The wind breathes across the shutters. Somewhere downstairs, a stool falls over with a gentle clatter. You lie back. The mattress groans. A child sleeps beside your bed, and morning hasn't even begun yet. Morning arrives not with a sunrise, but with a banging pot. Downstairs, someone has decided that the best way to usher in the day is with the sonic equivalent of a goat learning percussion. The sound bounces up the staircase, rattling your teeth and confirming what you already suspected. Sleep is over. You sit up slowly. The mattress makes a noise like a resigned sigh. Across the room, the boy from last night is already gone. No sign of him but a faint indent on the floor and a single oat left behind from whatever breakfast he scurried off with. You give the oat a nod of respect and stand. Downstairs, the tavern is shifting from dream world to business. Chairs are being uprighted, mugs collected, and ashes swept back into place. A few bleary-eyed patrons have either woken early or simply never left. One man is holding a spoon and looking at it like it owes him money. The tavern keeper is behind the bar, ladling something thick and grayish into bowls. You approach with caution, and before you can ask, she nods toward a rickety table. "Sit there." "I'll bring it over." You obey, mostly out of fear. The bowl arrives with a thud. Inside is porridge. Probably? It has the consistency of regret and smells like oats and ambition. You stir it with the spoon provided, wooden, cracked, possibly older than the spoon guy still mumbling in the corner. You take a bite. It is warm. That's its most redeeming quality. It tastes like the memory of oats filtered through a sock. You chew slowly, wondering if this is a punishment or a test. The tavern keeper returns with a plate, a slab of coarse bread and what might once have been cheese. She sets it down and gives you a look that says, "Eat it or don't. Either way, I'm not apologizing." You do eat. You're not proud, but hunger isn't picky. Around you, other patrons are shoveling down their portions with the weary skill of people who've eaten worse. You spot the boy in the corner again, his bowl scraped clean already, face focused like he's tasting victory. Someone next to you mutters, "Better than last week." That one moved. You pause. The tavern keeper snaps. "Food don't move. Customers do. Eat up." No one argues. You sip from a pewter cup of something that might be water or might be barley tea left too long in a lonely tankard. It tastes earthy. And not in the poetic farm-to-table kind of way, more like someone literally scooped it up from near the table. Still, you feel better. Fullish. Awake-ish. The porridge is growing on you, or at least forming a protective layer in your stomach. You glance around. The day is beginning. Merchants whisper about roots. Locals argue about chickens again. The tavern buzzes. Breakfast is not complimentary, but here it never really is. You pay in coin, in silence, in enduring the flavor, and somehow it's enough. The tavern by morning is almost unrecognizable. Gone is the candle-lit haze, the stew-scented din, the shadows full of stories. What's left behind is wood and light and the sort of awkward silence shared by people who laughed too loudly together the night before. The sunlight slips through the warped window panes in tired stripes, catching on dust motes and half-dried tankards. You sip the last of your gritty drink and look around. The crowd is a different one now. Some are holdovers from the night, the ones with wrinkled tunics, stiff necks, and expressions that suggest the floor wasn't as comfortable as hoped. Others are freshly arrived, smelling of dew and the outside world, blinking as they adjust to the warm, lived-in gloom of the tavern's interior. There's a merchant laying out his wares on a side bench, spools of ribbon, folded linens, and what looks like a taxidermied ferret wearing a bonnet. Beside him, a woman in a green dress negotiates the price of apples with an intensity usually reserved for treaties. Two travelers compare maps that neither of them truly understand. They argue softly about whether a blotch is a river or an ink stain. Their voices drift your way, comforting in their absurdity. And across the room, the dice table has been wiped down, mostly. Grizzled Beard is already in place again, this time with a new partner, a tall woman with the unmistakable look of someone who's never played and intends to lose with style. He begins explaining the rules. They're mostly made up. It's a strange intimacy that lingers in taverns like this one. The people you barely spoke to last night now feel like distant cousins. You exchanged glances in the firelight, laughed at the same spilled drink, heard each other snore through thin walls. You wouldn't call them friends, but there's a softness there, a shared experience burned in like smoke in wool. You spot the boy again, darting between tables, collecting mugs, earning crumbs and coin with equal determination. He pauses at your table and gives you a half smile before vanishing once more into the sea of shuffling feet. Even the tavern keeper looks different now, still stern, still fast with a reply, but less shadowy, more sunlit. She wipes down the counter with a rag that's lost its will to clean, but clings to tradition. Outside the front door, the street calls, carts rattle past, chickens protest about something important, and a dog with eyebrows larger than its body barks at a barrel with deep commitment. You could leave now, you probably should. But you linger a moment longer, not because you're waiting for anything, but because you know, once you step out, this place begins to fade, not in memory, but in magic. And that would be a shame to waste too quickly, so for now, you stay. 1 more minute. One more breath in the smell of ash and bread and yesterday. Sometimes, strangers deserve a proper goodbye. You sense it before anyone says it. The shift, the quiet preparation. People are beginning to leave. Some gather their things with noisy rustling, straps buckled, cloaks shrugged on, coin purses checked, rechecked, and quietly sighed over. Others take their time, sipping from the dregs of their mugs. Not out of thirst, but ritual. Farewells are never loud here. They're more like the closing of shutters at dusk, steady, practiced, inevitable. The pair who argued over the map folded up with the care of someone burying a secret. The merchant packs away her bonnets and ferrets, pausing only to wink at the tavern keeper, who grunts a reply that might be a goodbye or a threat. The woman in green adjusts her shawl, glances around the room once more, and steps out into the light like she's walking into battle. At one table, 2 men shake hands. They don't smile. Just nod. That's all the emotion they need, or can spare. The dice woman loses one final game to Grizzled Beard and leaves laughing, her pouch lighter, but her mood somehow brighter. You realize the tavern never empties, it just reshuffles. As one group leaves, another enters, damp from the morning mist, clothes muddy, eyes scanning for warmth. They take the seats still warm from the last bodies. They fill the air left behind by stories that haven't quite stopped echoing. You stand at last. Stretch. Your bones respond with the reluctant snaps and creaks of old furniture. You adjust your bag, heavier now with crumbs of experience, lighter in actual possessions. You glance back once, just to see if it looks different now that you're leaving. It does. A little. But not the boy. He's still there, elbow deep in tankards, hair sticking in 10 directions, humming something tuneless. He looks up, gives you a brief, familiar nod. And there she is, too, the tavern keeper, leaning on the counter, cleaning a mug that stopped being dirty 3 scrubs ago. She doesn't say goodbye. But then again, neither do you, because this place isn't about farewells, it's about pauses. You push open the door. It creaks like everything else in this world. Outside, the wind is colder, but not cruel. You step out, boots crunching on straw and frost, and take one final breath of tavern air. Warm wood, ash, laughter, stubborn bread. Behind you, the door swings shut. And just like that, you are a stranger again. You don't exactly plan to visit the bathhouse. It just sort of happens. One moment you're walking down the rutted street, stretching your legs after the tavern's hospitality, and the next, you're following a scent trail of damp lye soap, steaming water, and something faintly reminiscent of boiled cabbage. The building doesn't advertise itself. No sign, no name, just a crooked wooden door that sweats in the morning sun. A small boy with a bucket sloshes past you, gives you a once-over and mutters you look like you need it before disappearing around the corner. That seals it. Inside, the bathhouse is humid. Not steamy in a relaxing way, more in the your shirt will never dry again kind of way. Wooden walls drip with condensation. The air smells of soap, smoke, and heroic attempts at cleanliness. A woman with forearms like tree trunks and a towel around her neck nods at you. Buckets over there. Water's warmish. You thank her. She doesn't respond. You glance around. There's a row of benches, a few half-barrels, a stack of towels that have clearly seen some things, and a line of wooden stalls offering as much privacy as a slightly apologetic curtain can provide. It's not glamorous. It's not luxurious. But it's here. And after a night sleeping on hay and a breakfast that felt like a dare, the idea of washing your face with something warmer than your own spit is deeply appealing. You strip down with the modest speed of someone unsure whether they're being watched. The curtain flaps once and settles. You sit in the barrel. It's damp. Your feet complain. Then the bucket arrives. Lukewarm water, soap that's more grain than foam, and a scrub brush that might once have been used on livestock. You begin slowly, awkwardly, and then thoroughly. There's something oddly meditative about scrubbing yourself down while someone in the next stall hums a tune with no discernible melody. You find dirt in places you didn't know had been introduced to dirt. Your skin protests, then thanks you. Your hair, which had begun to develop personality, surrenders to the wash. Now and then, other patrons shuffle past. A merchant with mint leaves stuffed in his ears. A monk humming psalms while drying between his toes. A child yelling about a soap bubble shaped like a cow. You see it. It does look like a cow. You rinse off with a final splash that takes your breath away. The towel is scratchy. The floor is cold, but when you dress again, slightly damp, thoroughly exfoliated and weirdly proud, you feel renewed. Not clean exactly, but cleaner than you were. Cleaner than most. The bathhouse hasn't changed. It still smells faintly of cabbage and decisions, but as you walk out into the open air, steam rising faintly from your collar, you feel taller. You also feel like no one should ask about what just happened. It's not a story for bragging. It's just what you had to do. As you linger in the bathhouse, basking in the wet afterglow of a cleanliness that hovers somewhere between symbolic and slightly damp, you notice the buckets. Dozens of them. They're not arranged in any sensible order, just scattered around the main chamber like loyal pets waiting for orders. Some are wooden and splintered, others metal and dented, a few clearly repurposed from other careers. One still bears the faint scent of pickled herring. Each one contains water in varying states, steaming, tepid, cloudy, suspiciously glittery. You have questions. You keep them to yourself. You reach for a second bucket, hoping to rinse the remaining lather off your arm, when a voice nearby mutters, "I wouldn't use that one." You freeze. A man across the way, a wiry fellow with exactly 3 teeth and the air of a person who's spent a lot of time regretting things, nods solemnly. That one's the foot bucket. You retract your hand, fast. Turns out, there's a subtle etiquette to communal bathing. You don't use the same brush on your hair and your feet. You don't assume a bucket's purpose. You certainly don't splash. Splashing, in fact, is frowned upon with an almost religious fervor. You're not sure why, but you instinctively comply. Soap's for everyone, someone says. Unless it's in someone's hand, then it's their soap. Again, you nod. There are rules here. You are learning. You sit back in your own stall, if it can be called that, and contemplate the strange intimacy of the place. Dozens of strangers, mostly naked, mostly quiet, united by a shared belief in water's redemptive powers. It should be uncomfortable. It somehow isn't. The distance between stalls is just enough for plausible deniability. The constant clatter of buckets covers most social sins. Still, regrets bloom like mushrooms in the damp. That time you reached for someone else's towel. He didn't say anything, but the silence was loaded. Or when you accidentally kicked the ladle and sent a fine mist onto your neighbor's drying tunic. You apologized, of course, but the look he gave you said, "You will remember this on your deathbed." Worst of all, you discover, halfway through rinsing, that the soap you've been using contains flecks. Not exfoliating grains, not herbs, flecks. Tiny, dark, unidentifiable flecks. You pause, consider. Then carry on. It's too late to start over now. A boy walks by, offering ladles of slightly warmer water for a few coins. You accept. It's the best decision you've made all day, as you pour the warm water over your shoulders, feeling it wash away both grime and minor humiliation. You realize the bathhouse is less about hygiene and more about humility. You emerge not just cleaner, but quieter, wiser, slightly pruned. And as you towel off with something resembling burlap, you look around and recognize that these strangers, these half-dressed, half-scrubbed, mostly silent bath-goers, are your companions now, for better or worse, for cleaner or still slightly questionable. Because sometimes the only thing more revealing than taking off your clothes is realizing how badly you needed to. Steam has a curious way of carrying voices. In the bathhouse, where privacy is an illusion and towels are optional, words drift like fog, never loud, never sharp, but always close. You don't mean to eavesdrop, but in a space like this you don't really have a choice. Every stall has ears. The voices float through the mist, half obscured by splashes and the occasional sneeze. They rise, settle, and slide through the slats in the wooden walls, carrying secrets far more revealing than bare skin ever could. "Did you hear about the miller's daughter?" one voice whispers. "Ran off with a spice trader, left a note, signed it with a drawing of a turnip." From the opposite side, they say the abbot's wine is just vinegar with a fancy label. A trio of older women trade recipes, half in code, half in scandal. One recommends crushed fennel for indigestion. Another insists all stew benefits from a dash of cherry bark and a whisper of passive aggression. The third doesn't say much, but the way she scrubs her elbows suggests she's seen things. Further off, someone's humming. Not a tune you recognize, more of a lullaby laced with gossip. Every few verses, they add a name. Thomas, Marjorie, a goose in the churchyard. You don't know if it's a warning or a local legend. Either way, it sticks in your head. One man monologues quietly to himself, listing the taxes he's dodged, the roofs he's patched, and a long-standing feud with a goat who knew exactly what it was doing. You find yourself frozen mid-scrub, listening, not out of malice, but fascination. These aren't your stories. They're fragments, oddly shaped puzzle pieces from lives you'll never lead. They carry no context. And that's what makes them beautiful. Historians still argue whether public bathhouses in medieval towns served as health institutions, gossip hubs, or glorified soup pots. But here, in the humid hush, it's clear. This is where the village breathes, where lives are unpacked, sloughed off, and whispered clean again. No pretenses, no titles, just voices, fogged mirrors of truth. Two young men debate philosophy behind the curtain next to you. One believes happiness comes from simplicity. The other counters, simplicity's for people who've never tried owning two boots. You chuckle, quietly. The steam carries it away before anyone notices. A woman behind you is trying to convince a child to wash behind his ears. He refuses on spiritual grounds. Her tone suggests this is not her first theological debate. In a lull, someone sighs and says, I dreamed I was a duck again. No one questions it. The bathhouse becomes a strange kind of theater. No script, no roles, just humanity doing what it does best, revealing itself in glimpses. You wonder what stories you're adding, what words of yours have floated into someone else's ears without permission. Eventually, you stop listening. Not because the stories stop, but because you've become part of them now. Just another voice in the steam. Eventually, you have to leave the water. It's not a law exactly, but your fingers have pruned into shriveled scrolls, and the bathwater around you has gone from pleasantly warm to slightly judgmental. You stand, knees creaking, and prepare for the final and perhaps most dangerous part of any medieval bathhouse visit, drying off with your dignity intact. You reach for a towel. It is, technically, fabric. Rough, threadbare, and somehow both damp and dry at once. You attempt a graceful exit from the stall, managing a modest wrap of the cloth around your middle. You feel accomplished, until you hear a rip and realize one corner of the towel is now attached to the hook. You retrieve it with what remains of your self-respect. Nearby, others are engaged in the same strange ballet. A man your age is aggressively patting his back with a towel that looks like it lost a fight with a cat. A woman balances on one foot while drying the other, wobbling like a determined duck. The monk dries his tonsure in slow circles, as if polishing a sacred plate. Everyone moves carefully, quietly, pretending not to notice how awkward everyone else looks. You find a bench near the exit and begin dressing. Putting on medieval clothing while slightly damp is not for the faint of heart. Your shirt clings to you like betrayal. Your breeches refuse to cooperate. Your hose twist, as if auditioning for interpretive dance. But slowly, so slowly, you reassemble yourself. Your boots are still wet from yesterday. You slip them on anyway. Across the room, someone sneezes, a thunderous expulsion that echoes off the beams and earns a polite round of nods. The bathhouse is still humid, still buzzing with whispered conversations and the gentle slosh of new arrivals. A small mirror near the door offers a glimpse of your face, pinker than before. Damp hair plastered into swirls, but beneath the flushed cheeks and the cowlick rising like a flag of defiance, you look almost new. You nod at the mirror as if to say, "We made it." And then, without ceremony, you step into the cool air outside. It hits you instantly, crisp, honest. A little rude, your freshly scrubbed skin reacts like it's been wronged. Goosebumps bloom. But it's refreshing too. The contrast between bathhouse haze and outdoor clarity feels like a rebirth, or at least a polite reset. As you walk away, you hear a shout behind you. You forgot your soap. You turn. A boy waves the suspiciously flecked lump at you like it's a royal decree. You wave back. It's yours now. He shrugs and pockets it. And just like that, the chapter closes. The bathhouse, with its buckets and gossip and steam, fades behind you. You're cleaner now. Not polished, not perfumed, but honest-to-goodness scrubbed. And in a world of itchy tunics and muddy boots, that's a kind of luxury no coin can buy. You walk on, lighter. You follow the scent of onions and optimism down a muddy path. And there it is. The village market. It's not grand. There are no banners flapping heroically or sweeping orchestras announcing your arrival. What you see instead is a lopsided collection of carts, blankets, barrels, and tables, each one groaning beneath the weight of ambition, root vegetables, and the occasional tax-dodging goose. The market is just beginning to stir. The sun peers over the rooftops like a sleepy neighbor, and stalls blink into life one by one. A woman with flour in her eyebrows stacks loaves of bread on a wobbling crate. A pair of brothers argue over how to display their onions to best communicate fresh but affordable. A fisherman unloads a net of eels that still seem to have career goals. It smells like damp hay, old apples, goat, and possibility. You step carefully between puddles, mindful that what appears to be solid ground may in fact be a cleverly disguised soup of mud and something worse. No one seems to mind. Boots here have seen things. You pass a basket of turnips so bulbous they look like they might rise up and run for office. The vendor nods at you. 3 for a coin, 4 if you promise to use them in soup. You nod back. He's made a strong case. Children dart between stalls, some tasked with errands, others clearly escaping them. A boy carries a sack nearly his size that seems to be leaking flour with every step. A girl balances an egg in each hand like precious treasure and dares the world to knock her. The rhythm of the market is both chaotic and oddly soothing. It moves not with efficiency, but ritual. Prices are haggled not just for savings, but for sport. Coins clink, voices rise, then soften. Somewhere, a chicken declares war on a cabbage. No one intervenes. A man selling beeswax candles tries to lure you in with compliments. You've got the ears of someone who appreciates subtle craftsmanship, he says. You thank him and move on quickly, before your ears develop a complex. Historians still argue whether these kinds of open markets were primarily economic engines or social ecosystems. But walking through it now, feeling the thrum of trade and chatter beneath your feet, the answer feels obvious. It's both. The market is where the village breathes during the day, just as the tavern did at night. You pause beside a cart of woven goods, blankets, cloaks, the occasional sock with ambitions of being a mitten. The vendor offers a smile and a sample. You accept. It's warm. A little scratchy, somehow perfect. The market stretches on. Around corners, behind buildings, spilling into alleyways. You know you won't see it all, but that's part of the magic. Every turn holds something unexpected. A new smell, a new sound, a chance to lose a coin or gain a story. And in this place of barter and bustle, you find yourself smiling, not wide, just enough. You tell yourself you're just browsing. That's the first lie, because 10 minutes in, you're standing at a stall trying to trade a button, a walnut, and a semi-convincing compliment for a comb made of polished bone. You didn't wake up needing a comb, but now it feels like the linchpin to your continued existence. The vendor, a wiry woman with 7 braids and no discernible sense of humor, stares at your offering like you've placed a live weasel on her table. I don't trade in nuts, she says coolly. Not even lucky ones, you ask. She pauses. You might have piqued her interest. Markets like this one don't run on coin alone. Oh sure, silver will get you somewhere. But so will a good story, a favor owed, or a particularly shiny rock. You overhear one man trading 2 chickens for a song. Not a performance, mind you, just the lyrics scribbled on a scrap of parchment. The chickens look unconvinced, but a deal's a deal. Elsewhere, someone barters a spool of dyed thread for a single clove of garlic. You don't ask why. Garlic in these parts is either medicinal, mystical, or marital, possibly all 3. You wander on, tempted by things that only seem valuable because they've been placed lovingly on worn velvet, a cracked mirror, a wooden spoon carved like a swan, a half-burned candle labeled, "Smells like yesterday." You don't need any of it. That's the second lie. At another stall, a man with 1 eyebrow and 2 dogs offers you a piece of honeycomb in exchange for a riddle. You hesitate. Then, channeling every half-remembered bedtime tale, you ask, what flies without wings and never rests? He squints. His dogs squint. You see the gears turning. Then he grins. Time, he says. You grin back. No, it's soap bubbles, but close. He laughs. You get the honeycomb. Bartering in the market isn't about winning, it's about connecting, about performance. A little dance of charm, bravado, and bluff. You watch an old man convince a baker to trade a loaf of rye for a pair of wool socks with holes strategically placed for ventilation. She agrees. They shake hands. You applaud internally. Historians still argue whether medieval marketplaces fostered social cohesion or chaos. Standing here with the sun on your back and three strange objects in your bag that weren't there an hour ago, it feels like both. Maybe a bit more of the latter. Your final stop is a crate labeled Odds Ends, No Promises. You dig through it. There's a chess piece carved into the shape of a man holding a turnip. A whistle that doesn't whistle. A scrap of cloth embroidered with the letter Q and absolutely nothing else. You buy it all. Not because you need it, not because it's practical, but because this is what markets do. They turn strangers into traders and things into stories. And you're walking away with the strangest souvenirs of all, memories wrapped in nonsense. The market doesn't just sell things. It tells things. You hear it before you see it. The distant clang of a tambourine, the uneven bleat of a badly tuned flute, and a voice proclaiming something grand and possibly untrue. You push through a knot of onlookers gathered in a circle, each craning to catch a glimpse of the chaos at its center. A juggler stands on an upturned crate, wobbling just enough to keep the crowd nervous. In his hands, 3 turnips and what might be a live ferret rotate with reckless ambition. The ferret is cooperating. Maybe? The juggler grins, and the crowd erupts into applause. Someone throws a coin. Someone else throws a question. Why the ferret? The juggler winks. He owes me money. The performance continues with a slapstick pantomime involving an invisible cow, a wheel of cheese, and a love triangle between 2 boots and a cloak. It's confusing. It's brilliant. It's exactly what everyone needed. Just down the path, the preacher stands on a barrel, robes flapping in the wind like mildly offended curtains. His voice rises and falls with theatrical fervor. "Repent," he cries, "for the end is near." "How near?" a fishmonger yells back. The preacher pauses. "Well, nearish." He adjusts his hat. "The point is, you should stop eating oysters in months without an R. Because of sin? No. Because they go off, my child." The crowd murmurs approval. Several people inspect their oysters with renewed suspicion. Nearby, a town crier steps forward with a scroll the length of a small fence. He unrolls it with a flourish, clears his throat dramatically, and begins. Hear ye, new regulations on pig tethering in public squares." The crowd groans in a way that suggests this is not the first time pigs have been involved in legal disputes. "Furthermore," the crier continues, "there shall be no beetroot flinging within market bounds, no matter how disrespectful your neighbor has been." You glance around. Several vendors discreetly hide their beetroot supplies. Historians still argue whether these market declarations served as civic order or community theater. Watching the crowd heckle the town crier, you suspect both. Law here is less about obedience and more about performance. Proclamations aren't just read. They're received, questioned, mocked, and sometimes revised on the spot by sheer willpower. As you wander past a puppet show featuring an oddly political chicken, you realize this is the village's real news network. Not scrolls or scholars, just voices, passion, and a willingness to shout at a stranger until the truth, or at least agreement, emerges. You sit for a while on a stone wall, eating the last of your honeycomb and listening to a woman tell fortunes using teacups, twigs, and an unusually large beetle named Simon. She tells you your future smells faintly of rosemary and betrayal. You thank her anyway, and as the market buzzes with voices rising over turnips and destiny, you lean back and smile. Because sometimes a good story is the best thing money can't buy. Eventually the market begins to thin, not end, not close, just loosen, like a belt after a feast. The crowds thin, the shouting softens. The smell of roasted chestnuts fades into the scent of tired horses and trampled time. It's the moment just before the day exhales. You walk slowly now, dragging your feet a little more than before, not from exhaustion, but because leaving feels premature. You've bought nothing essential, yet your satchel hangs heavier with objects that defy explanation and practicality. A thimble shaped like a badger. A ribbon embroidered with the letter Y, no context given, none asked. A dried orange slice tied with twine and optimism. These things have no use. But somehow, in the way that only truly useless things can, they feel important. You pass the bread stall again. The baker waves, pressing a lopsided roll into your hand without a word. It's warm. You don't question it. You take a bite. It tastes like flour and kindness. A man selling ink nods at you, as if he's recognized something about you that even you haven't. "Good day for leaving," he murmurs. You nod back. It is. You find yourself near the edge of the market now, where the stalls taper into shadows and cart ruts lead off into countryside. Behind you, the market chatters on. Familiar voices now, laughing, bargaining, shouting, murmuring, repeating phrases you didn't know you'd memorized. A goat ambles past you, entirely unsupervised, with a sense of purpose that suggests it's late for something. A girl with red ribbons in her hair skips by and says, "You smell like honey and trouble," then vanishes before you can decide how to feel about that. You pause. You don't really want to go, but you know the longer you stay, the less likely you are to leave. That's how markets get you. Not with prices, but with the soft trap of belonging. The sense that just maybe you could stay here forever and barter your way through life with stories and socks. Historians still argue whether open-air markets served more as economic hubs or community centers. But standing here now, on the fringes of laughter and the smell of onions, it doesn't feel like either. It feels like a spell. You step away, finally. Not with a grand farewell. No waves, no trumpet blast, just a shuffle of boots on dirt, a satchel of nonsense, and the faintest dusting of flour on your sleeve. You glance back once, out of habit. The juggler's ferret is now wearing a hat. You smile. The road ahead isn't calling, it's just quietly waiting. And as the market fades behind you, you carry more than objects. You carry glances, jokes, crumbs, snippets of overheard arguments about radishes. You carry the shape of a place that gave you nothing you needed and everything you didn't know you wanted. You walk on, and the market continues without you. You've done it again. You've wandered out of the village and onto the open road with the kind of preparation that can only be described as conceptual. You have no map, no destination, and no real understanding of where this path leads. But your boots are tied, your satchel is full of questionable treasures, and your mind is just blank enough to make it work. They call it a pilgrimage. You're not entirely sure to what or where, but the word sounds noble, and it's better than saying, "I started walking and forgot to stop." That. And people are far more generous with bread and blessings when you throw around spiritual-sounding terms like seeking wisdom and on a journey of reflection. The path ahead winds lazily through the countryside. It's not particularly scenic, unless you have a passion for sheep, mud, and the occasional aggressively cheerful wildflower. But it's quiet, and the sun plays peekaboo through the clouds like it's trying to help. Your first companion is a crow. It follows you for several minutes, hopping from fence post to fence post like it's keeping score. When you finally acknowledge it with a nod, it caws, offended, and flies off. You feel snubbed. The road continues. You pass a signpost pointing to 3 towns, all with equally confusing names: Splotter-on-Marsh, East Upper Whittle, and simply here. You choose here, mostly because it seems safest to aim for where you already are. Not long after, you meet an old man leaning against a walking stick. He tells you the stick is made from a tree that once refused to burn, which is either deeply mystical or a result of poor seasoning. You nod, as if you understand. He says he's walking in the opposite direction because the road west smells like regret. You part ways before you have to unpack that. Your pace is leisurely, the path uneven. Every few steps, a pebble works its way into your boot, like a small agent of chaos. You stop often, not because you're tired, but because every rock and shrub seems like it could contain a story if you stare at it long enough. Historians still argue whether most medieval pilgrims were truly devout, or just looking for an excuse to leave their in-laws. You suspect the truth lies somewhere between divine calling and "I just needed a break." You hum a little as you walk, a tune you don't remember learning. It fits the rhythm of your steps. Eventually, the path widens into a clearing with a large, lopsided stone in the center. Someone scratched "Don't trust geese" into it. You sit beside it for a while, eating a bit of bread from the market. It's stale now, but you pretend it's rustic. The sun dips a little lower, and still you walk. No rush, no hurry, because sometimes the point of a pilgrimage isn't the destination. It's just not being wherever you were before. Not long into the next stretch of road, you discover that wayfinding in the countryside is more interpretive art than science. A fork in the path offers you three choices. One path winds left past an ancient oak that leans like it's been listening to secrets for centuries. Another slopes right into a foggy dip with alarming enthusiasm. And the third seems to end immediately in a suspiciously dense patch of nettles. None are labeled, naturally. You consult your memory, which offers no help. You consult your instincts, which have a long and disappointing track record. Just as you begin to consider the sit down and hope someone walks by approach, salvation appears in the form of a dog. A scrappy, scruffy mutt with a torn ear, one eye squinting like he knows something you don't, and the casual confidence of an animal that has absolutely never asked for permission. He trots up, sniffs your boots, and promptly flops down in the exact center of the left path. You take that as divine direction. You follow him. He doesn't look back to check if you're following, he just assumes you will. Occasionally, he pauses to investigate a smell or bark at an especially provocative rock, but otherwise, he leads with steady certainty. You begin to suspect he's done this before. Possibly thousands of times, possibly in a past life as a minor saint. As the road narrows and the trees draw close, you try to stay optimistic. The dog seems confident. You, less so. The light filters through the canopy above in lacy ribbons, and the wind rustles leaves just enough to sound like faint whispers. You hum to cover the noise just in case. Eventually, you spot a sign nailed to a post. It reads, "Pilgrims welcome. Warm meals, clean hay, no judgment." There's an arrow, and below it someone has scratched, "Except Jeffrey." You know what you did. You follow the arrow. So does the dog. Soon enough, you arrive at a small hermitage, really just a cottage with aspirations, tucked into the edge of a clearing. Smoke curls from the chimney. A woman with an apron and eyebrows that suggest she brooks no nonsense stands on the porch. "We've stew and bread," she calls. If you've got coin or news, you offer her both. She nods. Inside, the air smells of rosemary and thyme. Not thyme, though there's plenty of that too. You sit by the hearth. The dog, without being invited, curls beside your boots and begins snoring immediately. You envy his certainty. Historians still argue whether stray animals accompanied pilgrims as protectors, omens, or merely parasites. Watching this particular creature twitch in his sleep, clearly chasing a squirrel in his dreams, you lean toward guardian. Dinner is hearty and served with minimal ceremony. Conversation flows easily with strangers who feel vaguely familiar. And as the fire crackles and the dog shifts closer to your feet, you realize you're not lost. Not exactly. You just let the dog decide for a while. Her name, she tells you, is Moss. Just Moss. No surname, no explanation. Just a shrug and a names are like coats. They don't always fit everyone. You nod like that makes sense. And in the context of this cottage full of drying herbs, hand-woven rugs, and one extremely judgmental chicken on the windowsill, it somehow does. Moss moves like someone who hasn't hurried in years and doesn't intend to start now. Her hair is streaked with grey and bits of mint. Her apron has pockets, each one packed with unknowable things. Feathers, stones, folded scraps of vellum, a spoon, and what appears to be the end of a carrot. She offers you stew again because you still look like someone who's half a bowl away from a proper opinion. You don't argue. The stew is hot and full of ingredients you can't identify but feel morally good about eating. The dog, who you've now mentally named Harold, though he seems to answer only to snack sounds, is curled by the hearth, snoring through his nose like an old bellows. Moss gives him a look that says she's seen him bring home worse travelers. You're flattered, probably. As the sun fades outside, she lights a beeswax candle and sits across from you, darning a sock with what looks like golden thread. You ask her if she gets many visitors. Enough, she says. Then she adds, not too many, thank the stars. You sip a strange tea she hands you. Smells like pine, tastes like you licked a forest floor, but in a comforting way. She explains that pilgrims pass through all the time, usually on their way to something they'll forget about 2 towns later. Not all are true pilgrims, she says, her eyes narrowing like shutters in a storm. Some are just people who walked long enough to start asking better questions. You suspect you fall into that second category. The walls of her cottage are covered in drawings, mostly plants, animals, and one that looks suspiciously like a bishop running from a goose. You don't ask. She tells stories as she works, not grand, epic tales, just gentle ones. About a bee that refused to sting, a toad that kept perfect time with her heartbeat, a dream she once had about a field of salt that turned into snow. You listen, eyes half-lidded, warmth pooling in your bones. Historians still argue whether hermitages were refuges for wisdom or simply clever ways to avoid city taxes. Sitting here, tea in hand, dog at your feet, and quiet washing over you like a thick blanket, you're convinced they were both. Eventually, she stands, hands you a thick blanket, and gestures to a small bed near the corner. Sleep's the second best healer, she says. Soup's first. You lie down, head sinking into something made of straw and lavender. Harold hops up beside you, turns 3 times, and collapses against your shin. You close your eyes, the scent of rosemary and hearth smoke wrapping around you like a lullaby. And for a moment you feel completely, impossibly still. The morning comes gently. No rooster. No bells, just light creeping in through the shutters, warm and golden, like it's asking permission. You wake with the kind of quiet clarity that comes only after a night of sleep untouched by worry or itchy wool blankets. Harold, still snoozing, lets out a long sigh that smells faintly of stew and dreams. You stretch carefully, trying not to wake the dog or yourself too fully. Moss is already outside when you rise. She's tending to herbs strung on a crooked fence, humming a tune that might be ancient or improvised. She looks up, nods once, and gestures to a small wooden bowl on the stoop. Inside, warm porridge, 2 plums, and a hunk of honeycomb. You eat in silence, watching the mist burn off the surrounding hills. The cottage feels like it's drifting on the edge of the known world. There's no sound of carts or bells, no smells of manure or mutton pie. Just fresh earth, herbs, and a kind of stillness that feels older than language. When you return the empty bowl, Moss presses a bundle of dried sprigs into your hand. Rosemary, lavender, something slightly spiky you don't recognize. For your pack, she says, to keep things sweet. You nod, unsure what to say, so you settle on, thank you. She eyes you with a soft sort of smile. You'll keep walking? I think so. Good. Don't forget to look behind you sometimes. That feels like advice, maybe even wisdom. Harold appears just as you're adjusting your pack, tail wagging in a lazy figure 8. You scratch his ear, but he gives you a look that says, "This is your road now, not mine." He turns and trots back to the hearth. You take that as your cue. The path feels different now, still muddy, still full of ankle-threatening rocks, but lighter somehow. Like it's less about where you're going and more about how you're going there. You don't walk fast. There's no hurry. You pause often to smell something, to listen, to wonder. Historians still argue whether pilgrimages ended in epiphanies or just foot blisters. But as you pass a low stone wall where moss clings like memory, you find you don't really care. You're not looking for a revelation, you're just walking with purpose. Well, a purpose. It may change before lunch. The sprig bundle in your bag makes your bread smell like a medieval bakery having a nervous breakdown. You like it. At a bend in the path, you find someone's carved a simple face into a tree. It's smiling. You smile back. The sun finds your shoulders. Your boots find their rhythm. And you walk on, not searching, not running, just carrying the weight of a quiet night, a wise woman's herbs, and a journey that turned out to be exactly as unremarkable and meaningful as it needed to be. No fanfare, no miracles, just a sprig of something. And no regrets. You hear about the tournament long before you see it. It starts with whispers at a roadside stall. They're holding one today, someone mutters while buying an egg. Down by the common, knights and all, or squires pretending to be. Another voice adds, Sir Reginald's riding again. Last time he unhorsed himself before the horn. You follow the voices, your curiosity outweighing the calluses on your feet. Eventually, you crest a hill, and there it is, a meadow stretched wide beneath a lazy sky, framed by crooked hedges and one determined patch of daisies. A faded banner flaps half-heartedly from a splintered pole in the center. You've arrived. The tournament field isn't grand, it's lumpy. The grass is patchy. Someone has tried to rake lines into it, but they mostly resemble apology scribbles. A handful of spectators gather in clusters, mothers with baskets, men with tankards, and children with sticks that will definitely become weapons before the day is out. There are knights, technically. They stand to one side in armor that ranges from impressive to found in an attic. One is missing a greave. Another's helmet tilts sideways like it's avoiding eye contact. Their horses, more patient than proud, stand chewing thoughtfully as though they know exactly how silly this all is. You find a seat on a bale of hay next to an old woman who offers you a boiled sweet and tells you she only comes for the crashes. The announcer finally appears, a young man with a booming voice and a questionable mustache. He clears his throat. Welcome, noble folk and curious wanderers, to the tournament of modestly adequate valor. The crowd claps, politely. Except the goat near the fence. It just stares. Today's events shall include a foot race in full mail, the ever-popular cabbage toss, and of course, mounted combat. A boy nearby gasps. Real horses? He asks. The announcer squints. Horse adjacent. At this point, everything seems ready. Except it's not. A horn is meant to signal the start, but the hornblower is late, or asleep. Possibly both. A young squire jogs off to find him while the knights loiter, clearly unsure how to fill unscripted time. One practices drawing his sword. It gets stuck. Another kneels to adjust his boot and gets stuck. A third tries to mount his horse, fails, and pretends he meant to do stretching exercises instead. You admire the commitment. Historians still argue whether local tournaments were meaningful martial training or just glorified county fairs. Judging by the man trying to balance a flagon of ale while wearing a chainmail coif, you're leaning toward fair. Eventually, the horn blows. Not from the official instrument, but from an elderly man who improvises with a conch shell and a lot of confidence. The crowd cheers anyway. After all, it's not about formality. It's about spectacle. The knights line up, their squires look nervous. The cabbage tossers stretch dramatically, and as the flag is raised slowly, almost apologetically, you settle back on your hay bale, realizing you've found the most gloriously inefficient tournament in the land. The flag is up. The crowd is buzzing, the announcer's voice is cracking with anticipation, and yet, nothing is moving. One night, Sir Ambrose, by the shouts from the peanut gallery, sits astride his horse like he's just remembered he left the oven on. He holds a lance, though it points a little downward, as if even the weapon itself is hesitant. The other knights fidget in their saddles, adjusting bits of armor, dropping gauntlets, and squinting into the sun as though hoping for divine intervention, or at least some shade. Then Sir Reginald makes his move. He nudges his horse forward with all the ceremony of a man preparing to recite a poem he doesn't fully understand. The horse takes a few thoughtful steps, then stops to consider a nearby patch of grass. Sir Reginald kicks again, but gently. He's not a brute. And the horse responds by turning in a graceful, reluctant circle. The crowd applauds politely. It's unclear if they're cheering effort or resignation. Sir Merrick, meanwhile, manages to line himself up with a rival and actually lowers his lance to the proper angle. This causes his horse to panic and bolt 10 feet forward before stopping dead. Merrick lurches in the saddle like a sack of regret and barely holds on. From the sidelines, a group of children begins to imitate the knights with sticks and frying pans, their choreography somehow tighter than what's happening on the field. One particularly committed child has fashioned a helmet from a cabbage and seems to be winning. The announcer tries to rein things in. "A noble start. The joust proceeds. Valor on display," he declares. No one believes him, but we all appreciate the optimism. You're not sure if what follows can be called a joust. It's more of a gentle convergence. The knights begin their charge at a cautious trot, bumping lances and muttering apologies as they pass. One drops his weapon entirely, another forgets to let go and is pulled halfway off his horse before gravity makes the decision final. There are no injuries, unless you count Pride, which is currently being trampled underfoot by a confused steed named Buttercup. Still, the tournament carries on. Historians still argue whether such events were meant to test battle readiness or simply dazzle peasants with the illusion of valor. Watching Sir Ambrose try to remount his horse from the wrong side while whistling casually, you suspect it was mostly the latter. But there's charm here. No bloodshed, no bitterness, just men in heavy metal hats trying their best not to fall over in front of their neighbors. You respect it. Eventually someone manages a hit. It's a light tap, barely enough to knock a feather loose from a decorative plume. But the crowd erupts as if a dragon's been slain. The knights dismount and clasp arms. They're exhausted. They've achieved almost nothing, and it's perfect. Because sometimes glory isn't about victory. It's about not needing a medic at the end. Once the jousting concludes, mercifully with only one bruised shin and a bruised ego, the real spectacle begins. The games. You've barely settled back into your hay bale when a large man with very short legs and an incredibly serious expression marches to the center of the field, cradling a cabbage like it's a sacred artifact. Behind him trail a dozen eager contestants, sleeves rolled, brows furrowed, each carrying their own leafy projectile. The cabbage toss is about distance, not style. But that doesn't stop anyone from treating it like a cross between interpretive dance and medieval warfare. First up, a wiry teen who spins 3 times for dramatic effect and then hurls the cabbage so forcefully it explodes mid-air. The crowd gasps, impressed. A dog bolts from the sidelines, grabs a leafy chunk and disappears into the hedgerow like a vegetable thief. Next, a man built like a fireplace tosses his with such effort that he spins out, slips, and lands squarely in the mud. The cabbage, meanwhile, travels all of 8 feet before bouncing tragically into a puddle. He bows anyway. The crowd cheers. Enthusiasm, it seems, is everything. Then comes Agnes. Agnes is small, stooped, and wears 12 shawls. She shuffles forward, lifts the cabbage with both hands, and tosses it underhand like she's skipping a rock across the Thames. It arcs gracefully, lands with a thud, and rolls for what feels like forever. Past the markers, past the competitors, past the betting goat someone tied to a pole. It finally stops against a rock 50 paces away. The field erupts, children scream, a man faints. Someone yells, "She's a witch," but it's in admiration. Agnes nods, says, "Used to be in the militia," and walks off to a hero's applause. The games continue. There's a guess that smell competition involving jars of unidentifiable substances, one of which sends a participant reeling and whispering, "That's definitely fermented eel. I've smelled that before." A sack race follows, though due to lack of sacks, participants hop in loosely stitched tunics. One brave soul tries hopping in full armor. It goes poorly. Then the crown jewel. Spot the herald. 3 men stand side by side, each wearing flamboyant tabards and quoting historical proclamations. One is a real village herald. The others are imposters. The crowd interrogates them with questions like, "What's the tax on pigs?" and "Spell aqueduct." Eventually, the imposters are revealed when one refers to the king as "What's his face?" The real herald is awarded a turnip bouquet. He accepts it with regal dignity. Historians still argue whether such events were truly competitive or merely a way to air out the villagers. Watching a boy run full speed while wearing his father's boots and shouting, "For honor and onion pie," you suspect the answer is yes. You laugh, not a snort or a chuckle, a slow, tired, genuine laugh. Because for all its nonsense, there's something beautiful in a field of cabbages, chaos, and community. As the last cabbage is tossed and the final flag waved, the tournament begins to unravel, not with a bang or a bell, but with a communal sigh. The sun has begun its descent, casting long, golden fingers over the field, making everything look a little more noble than it actually is. Knights remove helmets with great ceremony and much grunting. You watch Sir Reginald pour an entire cup of water over his head and say, "That was the most exhausting standing I've ever done." His squire nods, holding the lance like it's a cursed object. A child nearby tries to joust a scarecrow with a broomstick, misses, and is congratulated anyway. The crowd begins to filter out, legs stiff from sitting on questionable hay and backs warm from the sun. The children linger the longest, chasing chickens and trying to imitate the cabbage toss with whatever produce they can steal. Someone hurls a beetroot and gets cheered for their creative interpretation. Vendors pack up. A pie stand offers 2-for-1 deals on slightly sun-softened goods. You buy one that smells suspiciously of lavender and regret nothing. It tastes like sugar and exhaustion. You sit again, this time on the slightly lopsided bench near the hedge, and watch as the last competition winds down. It's the slowest sword draw. The object is simple. Draw your sword slower than anyone else, but without stopping entirely. The winner, a bearded man named Oswin, takes 2 full minutes to unsheath a blade while maintaining aggressive eye contact with the audience. You've never seen anything so tense and pointless. It's glorious. The announcer, now hoarse and sunburned, gives one final declaration. "Thus concludes the tournament of modestly adequate valor. May your valor remain adequately modest until next year." He bows. No one claps. It's not out of rudeness. It's just that everyone's too busy packing pies, herding children, and trying to locate their shoes. Historians still argue whether these local festivals served religious, social, or purely ridiculous purposes. As you watch a man carry a duck under one arm while dragging a wheel of cheese under the other, you think, why not all 3? You wander through the now empty field, stepping over trampled grass and abandoned ribbons. There's a broken lance sticking out of the dirt like a flag of almost glory. You pluck a feather from the ground, probably once part of someone's hat, and tuck it into your satchel like a souvenir. Murmurs drift up from a group of villagers discussing whether Sir Merrick's horse is actually just a very large pony with delusions of grandeur. The breeze has cooled. The light has gone soft. You feel it settle in your bones. Not weariness, not exactly. Just a pleasant sense of having seen something silly and sincere, something unpolished and oddly perfect. And as you head down the lane away from the tilty field, your boots crunching softly over gravel and grass, you realize that this tournament, like so many things, was never about victory. It was about gathering, laughing, and not falling off your horse too soon. You're walking again, not with purpose exactly, more with inertia. Your boots know the way now, following the dips in the road, the bends that curve just so, the scent of baked earth and distant smoke that says, almost home. The tournament is a pleasant blur behind you. Cabbage triumphs, noble missteps, the soft rustle of applause for a man drawing his sword like he was buttering toast. It's already turning into a memory, folding itself neatly into that growing collection of improbable yet beloved moments you carry. Your feet ache in that well-earned way. Your limbs are tired but not weary. Your mind is a bit like your satchel, full, cluttered, but in a strangely comforting fashion. You pass a familiar rock, then a familiar tree, then a very familiar goat who gives you a look like, "Back so soon?" You answer it with a shrug. It's been a long day. As the sun lowers and the sky turns the color of spiced wine, the village rooflines appear in the distance, clustered together like gossiping hens. Smoke curls from chimneys. You catch a whiff of stew and cider and something fried beyond recognition but clearly delicious. You don't quicken your pace. There's no need. The tavern isn't going anywhere. You turn the final bend and there it is, your tavern, slightly tilted, slightly smoky. Entirely perfect. The sign out front still squeaks in the wind, though someone's added a new layer of paint that makes the goose on it look slightly more menacing. The same wooden bench leans against the wall, worn smooth by years of elbows and laughter. Inside, the windows flicker with amber light. You open the door, and warmth swallows you whole. The same crowd's there, mostly. The bard is tuning his lute, or pretending to. The innkeeper raises a hand without looking up. The fire is alive and theatrical. Someone's trying to balance a spoon on their nose. You belong here. You find your spot, that same wooden chair that creaks in all the right places, and you sit. The table welcomes your elbows. A mug appears, steaming slightly. You don't ask what it is. You just drink. A familiar voice says, "You look like someone who lost to a cabbage." You grin. It was a noble defeat. The fire pops, as if applauding your return. You lean back. The tavern wraps itself around you like a wool blanket full of spilled stories and the smell of roasted garlic. Historians still argue whether medieval taverns were centers of community or just places to forget the cold. Sitting here now, belly full of mystery stew, feet warm by the hearth, you decide it was always both. Outside, the wind whispers softly through the shutters. Inside, the candles dim just enough to let the night in gently. And as the chatter softens and your eyelids begin to tug downward, you let the warmth and the weight of the day settle fully into your bones. You're home, for now. The bard finally starts playing. It's not the tune you expected. No grand tales of battle or romance. No ode to a lost love or a fierce beast tamed by song. Instead, it's something that sounds like it might have started as a lullaby and then got distracted halfway through. Gentle, irregular, a bit like someone plucking a melody out of a cloud. You close your eyes for a moment just to listen. One note trails into the next, like threads through fabric. The rhythm is inconsistent, but that makes it more beautiful. Like a memory half remembered, or the kind of dream you can only describe with hand gestures and sighs. Around you, the tavern murmurs along, no lyrics. Just hums, foot taps, the creak of shifting chairs, and the soft thud of someone resting their head on a table. You let your head tilt back slightly and notice for the first time that the ceiling beams have carvings, tiny notches, symbols, initials. One looks like a snail, another like a fish in a hat. It's unclear if they mean anything or if someone just got bored. Either way, they feel like secrets the wood decided to keep. Your drink is nearly gone. Just enough left to warm the tongue. A sweet herbal finish, like apples kissed by rosemary. It probably has a name like the Quiet Smith or Nun's Regret, but no one ever bothers to ask. You're not alone at your table anymore. A woman sits across from you, sipping something dark and spicy. She nods to you like you've both been here many times before. And maybe you have, in different clothes, different centuries, different stories. "Good song," she says. You nod. "Weird, though. Most of the best ones are." You both listen for a while longer. Someone tries to harmonize with the bard and misses spectacularly. No one corrects them. Historians still argue whether tavern music in the Middle Ages followed structured tradition or if it evolved freely from regional whimsy. judging by the tune currently blending harp twangs with spoon percussion and what may or may not be someone whistling through their teeth. The answer is yes. You feel your thoughts soften, your breathing slow. Time in this place doesn't tick, it meanders. You don't remember finishing your drink. You don't remember anyone leaving or entering. It's just always been this way. A dog barks once outside, not at danger, just because it can. The bard shifts to a new song, this one slower, almost underwater. A lull, a pause. You feel your head drift forward and backward all at once, like sleep is pulling from two directions. The woman across from you is gone, or maybe she never sat down. Maybe that's part of the dream. You blink slowly, heavy-lidded, full of music and warmth and a kind of drowsiness that reaches your bones. There's nothing left to do, nothing left to prove. Just the hum of the room, the flicker of firelight, and the long exhale of the night settling in. The fire has stopped trying to impress anyone. It doesn't crackle now so much as murmur, low, steady, glowing with that sleepy orange hue that makes everything feel like it's wrapped in velvet. You're still at the same table, though you couldn't say how long it's been. A minute? An hour? It doesn't matter. Time has gotten drunk too. The crowd has thinned. The loudest voices are gone, or perhaps they've simply been muffled by contentment. A few patrons remain, nursing drinks that have gone tepid, staring into space like philosophers of the hearth. Someone snores gently in the corner, completely accepted by the room. You realize your boots are off. You don't remember taking them off, but your feet thank you for it. They're tucked beneath your chair, near the coals where the warmth radiates strongest. One of your socks has a hole in the toe. Somehow it makes you feel rich. The innkeeper moves slowly now, like a tide rather than a person. He clears tables with the grace of someone who's been doing it since forever and isn't in a rush to finish. He wipes a mug with a cloth that's older than some empires and nods to you as he passes, the unspoken message being, "You're safe here." At another table, two old friends play a word game with the last of their bread crusts, poking fun at each other in whispers. One accuses the other of cheating by spelling a word that may or may not exist. The accused shrugs. "It sounds real enough," he says. They both laugh, a single breath, shared. The bard's hands now rest on the strings, motionless. He's watching the fire, like everyone else. The song is over, but the silence that follows is its own kind of music, an echo you feel more than hear. Historians still argue whether taverns were genuinely restful spaces or merely distractions from the toils of the day. Sitting here, your fingers loose, your shoulders heavier in the best possible way, you wonder if maybe it was both. Rest doesn't always have to be quiet. Sometimes it's a room full of gentle clatter, the soft murmur of strangers, and a sense that no one will ask anything of you until morning. Someone drops a spoon. No one flinches. Outside, the wind picks up ever so slightly, rattling the shutters with a sound like a lullaby played on hollow wood. You imagine leaves tumbling along the road, chasing shadows. The world out there is still moving, still turning, but in here, it has paused. You nestle deeper into your chair, the edges of sleep creeping like ivy up your limbs. The warmth of the room pools in your chest, not flashy, not loud, just certain. You close your eyes, not fully, just enough to let the light blur. And in this exact moment, you are nowhere else, wanting nothing else, needing nothing more. The fire is mostly ash now. It glows in soft pulses, the last embers winking like tired stars. The room has dimmed accordingly. Shadows have grown bolder, stretching long across the walls, curling under chairs, lounging in corners like old cats. Everything breathes slower. Even the tavern itself seems to exhale. You rise, or think you do. Maybe it's just a shift in your seat, your body adjusting like it's finally remembering how to rest. The wooden chair creaks a gentle lullaby beneath you. Your limbs feel heavy in that wonderful way, like someone has draped you in slowness. The innkeeper has stopped moving. He leans against the bar, polishing nothing. The bard's head has bowed forward, hands resting on the strings, as if the lute itself might drift off next. Outside, the wind has softened. No more rattles, just the occasional hush against the door, like night trying not to wake anyone. Your eyes fall to the table. A candle flickers there, low, almost out. Its wax has puddled, clinging to the wood like a quiet farewell. You watch it burn, not really thinking anymore. Just being, just existing. You feel the tug now. The soft call of sleep, not urgent, not demanding. Just patient. You let it pull, and so the tavern fades. The chairs, the walls, the fire, all dissolve into a gentle blur. You are warmth and breath and the slow echo of a lute that no longer plays. You are full of cabbage tournaments and herbal tea, of crooked nights and mysterious sprigs. You are nothing and everything and wholly safe. You're allowed to rest now. You've earned it. So let your thoughts drift like the smoke above the hearth. Let your breath deepen. Let the quiet take you. The night holds you. The road can wait. Sweet dreams,